Yeah, all right.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's just start it now. Let's start
Okay.
it in like 3, 2, 1. Okay, so this one will be pretty informal. Welcome to another episode of the Adopt Responsibility podcast. So I am here with Erik the Red, who I don't actually know your last name.
Ingram.
Ingram?
Yeah.
Okay. Erik Ingram. I know him only from jiu-jitsu. We became friends because he started coming to jiu-jitsu, and then he started helping me with my backhoe, made a little dealio. I give you some cedar, you help me with my backhoe. And anyway, as we were standing in the middle of winter working on the backhoe, we started to talk about God, and about 3 hours later, we were bitterly cold and very pleasantly surprised, I think, at the
Type of
depth, yeah, the,
conversation.
the conversation and the depth of understanding that we both had. Anyway, so then we're like, okay, let's talk again, and we're like, let's just do it on the podcast.
Yeah.
So
I've never done it before, so this is a new thing.
yeah, but yeah, so is there somewhere that you want to start the conversation?
Well, definitions I think is a big one because like I don't come from a religious background. So when you were talking about agape and stuff at the beginning of our last conversation, I was kind of lost on what you were actually talking about.
Well, what's your background? So when you say you weren't grown in a religious background.
I was introduced to religion as a kid, and it didn't really fit very well in my life. So I didn't continue with it, and it wasn't in my family. It was my babysitter that actually took me.
Hmm.
So that's how I learned about it.
How old are you?
Around five,
Oh yeah.
5 or 6, I think. I went to Sunday school for a bit, and then it was voluntary. I tried it for a bit, and then decided that there's other things to do on Sunday, and then kind of separated away from it.
So what was the? So I don't. This is going to be a conversation back and forth, but right
Yeah,
now it's a bit of an interview because
yeah.
I'm actually learning this stuff for the first time. So what was like the belief of your family? Was there any? Did you ever talk about deep things with your family?
No, there's no discussion of it. My my family was a broken family, so my dad left when I was about 4, and then my mom just did it whatever she could to make ends meet. So religion never was a focus. I don't
Okay.
think it was in her childhood much either.
Hmm.
So I was curious about it. The religions of the world always fascinated me. So any chance I got to read up on it, I learned as much as I could, but it was never compelling to become part of one.
Hmm. What was so in your household, which was your mom was basically the head of it then? Like you
Yeah.
was there, yeah. What was kind of like the guiding thing? Like was it? You told me that I could ask you any question.
Yeah,
So,
go for it.
like, was it a loving home? Was there, yeah, like, was it a loving place for you to grow up?
Yeah, so um, my mom's background, like she grew up in a very proper family until her parents passed away,
Okay.
and then she ended up in the foster system,
Oh yeah.
and then she spent most of the rest of her life trying to get some semblance of that life back.
Hmm.
So my whole life, all I saw was us trying to build up a life where we weren't at the bottom of the food chain.
Hmm. So then, okay. So I'm gonna jump a lot of steps then.
Yep.
What takes you from that upbringing to the like what's with this fascination in religion and philosophy? What has you reading Plato and Aristotle?
It was just, I remember having an existential crisis probably around 6 or 7, where I just didn't understand why we're here, where do we go when we die, um, the meaning of life and everything.
Mm.
And I didn't find the answers at Sunday school. So I started reading as I got older, started becoming fascinated with psychology. I was always a bit different than the other kids, so I wanted to figure out why. My mother even put me with some psychologists when I was a kid,
Hmm.
and
Was that good or how did that go?
it was interesting. Um, the two of them kind of gave up on me
Hmm.
because the intellectual conversations were going, I guess, a bit above their pay grades. So
Yeah.
they just gave me books, and they're like, "This is cool, but we're not getting anywhere. So here are some books. I
Yeah.
hope you can figure it out." And that was the end of that.
Hmm.
So I just started reading more.
Yeah. Okay.
So for me, it's more about psychology than philosophy.
Yeah, that was your
But
inroad.
they're so tied together that
Yeah.
it made sense to keep going.
Hmm. Okay. Awesome. I think that's a great basis of understanding for me. Um, so why don't I get you to explain a bit more what gets you into this conversation? So you pretty much came to jiu-jitsu, and then what I mean is like this conversation with me in particular. Like you came to jiu-jitsu, and then I know you and our coach spoke a little bit about like God stuff.
Yeah. So up until talking to him, I always had a very disparaging view of religion in general.
Hmm.
Not necessarily one or the other, because I've always lived my life based on utility.
Hmm.
So, and that was something I discovered lately, is I've always measured everything against its utility in life. Because I choose to live more about the now. I'm not so worried about what's going to happen after I'm gone, because I really have no idea. So I never understood the utility of religion. And part of it, I wonder, is the fact that we just discovered that my daughter is autistic, and it's looking like I'm also a high functioning autistic. So it kind of got me pondering about the possibilities. Does the autistic brain have capacity for faith? And then now I'm kind of looking to find out what is faith exactly. So talking to our coach on the way up to Kamloops, it was the first time that I actually had someone explain it to me in a way that I actually saw the utility of it,
Oh wow.
and it kind of got me.
Can you recount that, or was it more like
Um,
is it something you understand propositionally, or?
I think it is the fact that I saw a person that was able to find peace with the everyday through faith, which, I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's what most of us are missing, is just a sense of peace with the here and now, which is, I think, cause for a lot of the anxiety and unrest in the world. So to see someone that's actually at peace with most things, he still gets excited about other things, but ultimately, with his own life, he seems to be very content,
Hmm.
which kind of surprised me. And through our conversation up there, it became clear that for people that have more of a capacity for faith, it can bring a sense of peace.
Hmm. Okay, so now we're getting into more of a back and forth.
There you go.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. So when you say things are like you always viewed things, or in a way you still view things by their utility, like what's guiding that? Like what utility is, you need something that you're aimed at in order to say things are fitted to that goal. So like what is it? Is it just human satisfaction in a moment,
No,
in a lifetime?
believe it or not, there was. You ever watched the movie Cider House Rules? Okay, it was
No.
really, really good movie. One of the main characters in there at one point says something to the effect of, in life, everyone needs to have a purpose. Something to the effect of, without being useful, there's no point in you being around. I mean,
Like
it's
useful
kind
to
of
other people?
to society as a whole. So that really struck a chord with me, because that was about the only time that I found people were more accepting of me, because I have a knack for building things.
Yeah.
And I don't have much for the gift of gab or humor, so that was kind of where I fit, was being of use. And pretty much a large portion of my life seems to be revolving around, if it's not of use, why put any attention towards it?
Hmm. So just of use to like, what is it really serving use to the society, but like what is it shaping the society for? Like Like, would you be comfortable putting that straight into just an evolutionary, like, form of survival of the species?
I think you can look at most topics in the form of utility. I mean, Darwin's theory of evolution is entirely based on utility.
Mm-hmm.
Things that didn't have utility passed away, and things that were abundantly useful managed to
Yeah,
go on. I know that doesn't jive with a lot of theologies, but even just daily
Formally,
life
like,
to surviving for now.
yeah,
Like you still have to, like, work is a form of utility. It gives you money so you can pay the bills, so that you can buy gear so you can have podcasts. It
yeah,
was like everything has a utility.
totally. So if you ask the why behind any question, like, what are we doing here? We're having this podcast. Why? Because we're trying to get to the bottom of some difficult questions. Why?
Yeah.
Because we want to understand. Like, you ask why about 3 times to any question, and you get to all the existential stuff. It's like, well, what's the purpose of everything? You can get to that question with like 4 whys. It's like,
Yeah.
what is the purpose of everything? What is the why? Actually, you said that to me in that text. Like, we are building. Well, we kind of went back and forth, but we're building so much. We're building such a strong city in our world, in our global society, but we don't have a why. We don't have a direction that we're going.
We used to.
When?
It's well, at the end of World War II, that society at that point had the mentality of rebuild.
Rebuild, yeah.
So obviously, it was mostly Western culture that was embroiled in World War II. And when they came out of it, both sides, the Germans and the Allies,
But rebuild what?
they went into rebuild.
Yeah.
It was
Rebuild modernism, like rebuild the old systems, or because we didn't even really do that. We kind of just.
I think it was more based on structure. It was they went and rebuilt everything they destroyed. So just the physical. I don't know that they really focused on the metaphysical side of it. Like, they didn't worry about rebuilding the
I
concept
agree
of
with
society.
this. Yeah. No, I agree with this. But I think that this is a product of only like the modernist day that we live in. I think that if you look at any old religious structures, I'll give a rough date, say up until, well, let's just say up until like Occam and Descartes. So up until, let's just say the birth of America, okay? 1600s, 1700s. Up until then, everything that everybody was doing was serving the theological, like, hierarchy. It was serving God, whatever God that they believed. Everything they were doing was serving unto that.
And surviving.
But then any excess that you have beyond just surviving for this moment was pointed upwards. It was pointed towards, like, building a city, and the center of the city is the temple or the church. But then, yeah, like, I agree that now we're in a time and a place when we don't have that. Enderby, the town that we're in, isn't centered around. It's like, well, what is the purpose of this city? There is none. People are.
Well, it used to be something like a mine would cause a city to grow, or a fishing industry would cause a city to go. Now, like you say, there's no guiding principle. Like, industrialization, I think, caused the separation from religion being a guiding arrow.
I would just put it one step back. I'd say that I think what happens is, like, the mind of the society changes. I think that the mind's changed basically from what hopefully we'll have time to get into, a more ancient view of the world being symbolic. Everything is in and with God, into a modern view through Occam and through Descartes, and in the Christian tradition, I would say through Luther, through the Reformation. We can talk about that later. But I think that what happened was things breaking down, from, like, being one body in service of God, and we can define all these terms, to individuals, each individual trying to find their way. I think that the switch that happened was basically accepting the ontology of materialism or physicalism, or nominalism. All these words, very similar things, but basically the idea that reality, the very root of reality, is like time, space, and matter. The Copernican revolution, in my understanding, is a huge part of what did that for us. As we began to have a switch in our ontology, Then the religious switch, I think, and also the technological switch and the Industrial Revolution was like, came after that.
Well, I think what might have caused the split for a lot of people might have been the fact that the scientific community developing and growing was starting to come up with questions and answers that conflicted with theologies. Like go back as far as ancient Greece, they had a god for everything that we couldn't explain. There was a god of fire. There was a god of war. There was a god of death. There's all these different gods. Well, as you come up with a scientific method and you start understanding things more completely and giving education to everybody, not just the select few at the top, I think the disparity between the theology or a fundamental view of theology and science.
That's the key right there for me.
I think so.
Yeah.
And that's where the separation started happening.
Yeah.
I think
the separation happened between science and what you just said is a fundamentalist theology. And I would say that separation exists only because the fundamentalist theology is in their own bubble that I think is totally ripping things apart. I think that Christianity, when it went so fundamentalist and anti-science in a way, was killing itself. In the words of Nietzsche, that's exactly what happened.
And I think part of it might be, like, if you look at it from a societal structure standpoint, was it probably wasn't Aristotle and Socrates that caused the division.
No.
It was probably around before them, but most of Western culture is built off of ancient Greece. Everything from rhetoric to
Greece and Jerusalem. I think you have to see I think that you can see in a lot of.
Well, I think Jerusalem brought you the faith of Western culture, which was Christianity in the end.
Yeah.
Societal structure as a whole, as a functioning framework, came from ancient Greece.
Yeah.
So if you look at how the school system works now, it's very Aristotelic.
Yeah.
I'm the teacher, and I'm going to teach you these little tiny pieces along the way. Hello. And eventually you will get to see or understand the whole.
Yeah.
Socrates flew the opposite direction, where he went, this is a whole.
Yeah.
Let's start breaking this down. And from our last conversation, I kind of think that
I'm more Socratic.
A Socratic thinker.
I think I'd probably rather classify myself as Platonic, maybe even Neoplatonic, but I think that they both need to merge. So I'm feeling like we're kind of talking past each other.
Yep.
Hey, this is my cat. I feel like we're kind of talking past each other.
Well, so where I was going with it is,
Yeah.
I think a fundamentalist view of a theology is kind of an Aristotelic way of looking at it.
Yes.
And it's too simplistic, and you're trying to look at it in absolute terms.
I think I agree with what you're saying. I think to go a little bit further, I think it's to put God into this universe, and to basically say that God is the supreme being. So that's where so you're talking to someone who, in a way, I self-identify as a Christian, or at least let's say I want to be a Christian, but I'm very different from most modern North American Christians. But what you're getting from me is a lot more of an Eastern view. It's a lot more of an Eastern Orthodox view, and it's a lot more of the Catholic view. I would say I'm like where you're getting my perspective. Sure, it's Platonic, but it's Plato through, in my opinion, it's Plato through like Saint Maximus. It's Plato through some of the main church fathers, and then what I believe from Aristotle is through Aquinas, which is another church father who most of the Catholic doctrine is based on.
Okay.
And he was really, he was a lot more kind of like scientific in his view. And so okay, let's get through a few little definitions. I feel like we're coming at this conversation a little bit too like from the bottom in a way, without hitting a few top things. So we're kind of talking about each other. So like the difference I would say between the more Eastern Christian view and the more Western Christian view, the Western Christian view would be something like God is the highest being, God is the supreme being. And I struggle with that, and I also struggle in a way. I struggle with the personification of God, even though I grew up with that, and even though I default to that in a lot of ways. When I pray, I talk to God in the way that I talk to a person.
Yep.
But I know I don't believe that that's because he is a supreme being or a person. That's very Western. That's what I grew up with. That's Protestant. The more Eastern view is that God is the grounding of being. And so it's the difference between agent and arena. And so God is like the arena in which we live. And so for example, the Catholic tradition has, I just don't want my cat to hit the freaking microphone. She knows that she's not supposed to like be messing with this. Okay. Yeah, and so sorry, I'll go a little bit more here. It's just like the grounding of things, and so what happened in the Trinity? There's the Protestant view of God is that God is three persons. God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So that is the Father is essentially it's equivalent to love. The Son is equivalent to truth, and the Holy Spirit is equivalent, or in a way, it's similar to beauty. And so you have love, which is let's go back to our utility conversation. Love is the final point at which everything is perfectly united. We're aimed towards that. Well, how do we get there? Truth. Truth is what serves love. And Christ is the model. Well, what is truth? It's actually self-sacrifice. And then the process of that whole story coming together, and all of us Christians being gathered into that story, is that's the Holy Spirit. Okay, so that's the Protestant way of defining God as a Trinity. But what my opinion is, and where I come more Eastern, is that they put God into our idea of person. When they translated it, it was a lot to do with the translation. But originally, like the church fathers believed that the Trinity was hypostasis. It wasn't that it was three people, like three beings. It's that they're the grounding of each of these things. Christ is the grounding of truth. God is the grounding of love. It's like the source from which all love comes. And then the Holy Spirit is the grounding of all beauty. So, yeah, I think the agent arena is a really good way to like grapple with that.
Well, we were texting back and forth about. I was thinking about the fact that personification is somewhere along the lines. I think they came to the conclusion that personification of very complicated topics is what allowed the less inclined
people down the
individual
hierarchy to be involved in the same story.
To actually, well, we're all people. So if you could describe atomic physics in terms of people, you could get a 6-year-old to understand it.
And we desperately need everybody in the society to be on the same story. So it's not like this is a silly thing to do. It's not extremely important to do.
So asking a 6-year-old to understand the idea of a being all around us and we're in it and surrounded by it is way too far out there versus here's a person. That's the creator. And the problem is, I think the personification of really complex topics was supposed to, as you get older, evolve into a more complete view of what you're actually trying to personify.
Right.
But we never went past that step. I don't know if it was for control or just society as a whole is not capable or doesn't have the desire to go that deep dive into these topics. But for whatever reason, it never went much farther than that. It seems to have progressed towards what we see today.
Did you listen to that conversation that I mentioned between Peugeot and Weinstein? It was like 3 hours. You would
Yeah, I didn't
know
get
if you
to
did.
that one,
Okay.
no, unfortunately.
So they talk for a while about. Sorry. I'll be right back. I'm gonna put my cat inside. 4 children, 4 animals.
Lots of work.
Okay, what were we talking about? Okay, I was talking about that conversation with Peugeot and Weinstein.
Yep.
So yeah, so he talked about. I'll just explain really briefly, but yeah, like society used to be, Western society, almost maybe even all societies, used to have a structure in which understanding about metaphysical and philosophical questions existed in a hierarchy. And so if you had questions about that, whether you're a kid or you're a peasant or whatever, like if you're a peasant, like you were explaining about the situation of like if your mom was a single mom and she's just trying to survive, like she's just trying to get to the next thing. So, but if everybody just does that, then we just have like individual tribalism. We can't do that. So what do we need? We have these structures, and if you have questions about reality, you can ask the people who are above you in the hierarchy. So a child can ask his father, the father can ask the guru, or the saint or the church father, or whatever.
Yep.
And that went up, and then at the top of the hierarchy, like the people who gave the answers to how everything works, how it used to be in the Christian church, was essentially like you could think of it like a council across long distances of time. And so it was like an ever moving, flowing council of the best ideas. So basically, everybody would have their best ideas about reality, and then those ideas would get voted up the hierarchy. And if you had some great idea, maybe you could bring it to your father. He would bring that idea up to his superiors, cardinals, whatever. But then what would happen is you end up developing like a doctrine of what reality is. And so you have the Christian doctrine from the church fathers. And it's not like just a couple people sitting in a room, they get to say, this is what reality is, boom, boom, boom. It's mostly, you're only allowed to put in the highest place the perspective of people who've already passed away, and their life was filled with enough integrity that you could actually put them on that pedestal. But you don't want to put any living people. So the Great Schism was what happened in 1054, which was the Catholic Church broke away from the Eastern Orthodox Church, basically made the Western Christian Orthodox Church, which became the Catholic Church, it was basically to say, rather than having one church body where we can all exist in this single hierarchy, we are going to, like, we actually want a person to be at the top of that. That's what it developed into. And then that got corrupted. So the more that they put the weight of answering those questions on the people, the church people like who are alive today, it ended up getting really corrupt. And then in like the 1500s, then they had gone so corrupt that they were basically telling the peasants, like, you need to give us money in order to get into heaven, all these terrible things. Like, it divulged fast.
Yep.
So then we had the Reformation, which is what you see mostly in North America and a lot of Europe now, is a Protestant view of theology where they said, no, we don't want to hear, sorry, I'm going through church history now.
No, that's fine. I'm curious.
So then the Protestant Reformation is basically like, we don't want to hear about how to interpret all the hard questions of life. What's the meaning of my life? What am I supposed to do? We don't want to hear that from another person because look how corrupt they are. And they were kind of right, but they came at it from the bottom. They came at it, like, in my opinion, the Protestant Reformation is like a leftist protest, basically. It's like, you're coming too hard from the top, and I don't want to submit to your authority, which, like, fair enough, because they were being really corrupt.
Yeah.
But so what they did was said, and this is where I get off the boat with Protestantism, is they said the doctrine of sola scriptura, which is they basically believe, and this is the way I was raised, is that the Bible is inherent word of God, and what you do in order to get truth is you spend time with the words on that page. I would call that idolatry, but you take the Bible and you put it in a place of like this is the ultimate truth, and I mean, I pretty much agree with that. I pretty much agree that the Bible is true. Like, is the Bible true? Yeah, if anything's true, the Bible's true, according to me.
Okay.
But we need a way to interpret the Bible. So what Protestant people do is they basically have their like really individualist way of interpreting scripture where they go, I don't know what that scripture means, but I'm going to take from my pastor. He'll explain it to me. They're making the same hierarchy. They're putting somebody above them to interpret it to them. Or, I don't really like what that pastor has to say. I'm going to this other church. So now we have 14,300 something different denominations of Protestantism. In my opinion, that's all stemming from the Reformation, which is stemming from the Great Schism. And that, like, we broke away from having one church body. That's now become a million like literally thousands of denominations.
I think that's what puts a lot of people off of religion in general.
Yes, including Nietzsche. That's Nietzsche's problem. He's like, you're not one thing. How could I be a part of this? You're not one thing. But here's what I have to say, especially because I know that like pretty much everybody who's going to be like listening to this is like pretty Protestant.
Yeah.
Here's what I have to say is like, and it's funny because I've said this to my dad. My dad's pretty Protestant. I said this to my dad like half a dozen times, and I'm probably keep saying it to him. But like the difficulty is you still have to interpret scripture. So you want to say sola scriptura, and he doesn't totally subscribe to that. Sorry, Dad. But you want to say like the Protestant doctrine is sola scriptura. It's the word alone is what I need. And so and like
nobody can understand Old English properly.
I mean, not just Old English, like your entire language, everything you know is given to you by your culture. And so now we have all these people born and raised in secular culture given the words on the page. It's like you look through the page, you're not going to find an answer without interpretation. You're going to find an answer through your own lens, through the interpretation of your culture or your pastor, or if you want to take it really seriously like I did for many years, you go to the best Protestant teachers in the world, and it's like Francis Chan, that guy, like he's a big, popular Protestant talker dude. And he's really humble, and you can see the fruit of his life is really beautiful. And like you go to, and it's like, okay, I don't really know what this scripture means. I don't know, like, how am I supposed to live? Okay, let me listen to Francis Chan. You're doing the same thing. You're making a hierarchy. You're putting people above you to interpret scripture down to you. And so you're just not doing it in as stable as a way as what we used to do, which is there was a tradition in which that hierarchy existed. Last thing I want to say is just that the hierarchy I'm talking about is not a hierarchy of dominance like what most people think of. It's like if you're above, you get stuff from below. That's actually corruption. The real hierarchy is the Star of David. Do you know that star? It's a triangle on top of an upside down triangle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it means that as you go up in competence and authority, you're required to sacrifice it. And so as you gain understanding, you have to be giving more. And so somebody's not a saint unless they gave everything. And usually they were martyred. It required them. And so then we have Christ at the very top, which is he was above everybody, had the most power. He had everything. He was God made flesh. But with that, what did he do? He sacrificed himself in the most like upside down way. As our ruler, he chose self-sacrifice to the point of death. Not only to the point of death, but he did so in a way that defeated death itself. And so, yeah, anyway, that's all I want to say is like, it's not a hierarchy of dominance. It's a hierarchy of as you go up in understanding, you're required to sacrifice more. I would say that's how the universe is structured.
Your interest in Francis Chan is not creating a hierarchy, but it's discussing it with someone that's farther along the path. Well,
but I'm taking his interpretation like onto myself. I'm taking it for granted, but I don't have relationship to him in a way of authority. So he's acting like a father in terms of proposition, but not in terms of family. Like I'm not submitted to him. I don't need to like do what he tells me to do. I don't need to confess like things I've done wrong to him. He's just a guy on the internet, and I don't understand how the world works, but I definitely have a lot of relationship with the divine. And I don't understand how it all goes. Okay, I'll find the answers in Francis Chan. I don't think there's a solution in that. Like I think
that's why you have to watch and listen to more than one teacher. And I think that's where, like, from my perspective, it takes more than one book. So, like, I have an interest in a lot of theologies because I think the core of all of them is good. It's a projection towards empowerment and freedom of the soul. And I think where it kind of gets messed up along the way is the obsession with the hierarchy, with the deity at the top.
What do you mean by deity?
Well, they all have a deity of some sort. Every religion that's ever come before us, there's been over 3,000 apparently, if you talk to historians.
But every act you do, let me just challenge that in a way. Of course, everything has a deity, and I need you to define what deity is. But like every act you do has a final value. So, when you chop a potato, it's like, why are you doing that? Because I'm feeding my kids. Why are you feeding your kids? Because I'm taking care of them. Because I believe in this. Because I believe in that. And all the way up and up and up, all the way up to value, which is I believe that I need to be bringing love into the world. And so, like, isn't it inevitable that we have? If a deity is something other than that, then maybe I have a problem with that. But if a deity is a value, then it's inevitable. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a deity is just a personification of a concept. Is kind of where I've.
So your difficulty then, it sounds like, is more with the personification?
Yeah, I understand the utility of it because for a lot of people, understanding and doing really deep dives into existential topics is not interesting, or it's too complicated, or I think for a lot of people even it might actually cause that existential crisis. That feeling in your chest of panic, of like being not sure. It's easier to just go, this works, I believe in it,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And if you can go through your religion and work with that feeling, then your religion, I think, is a positive in helping you get along in life. Where if you use it as a crutch so you don't have to deal with that feeling, well, then you're just kind of limping through life.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I definitely agree with that. I think that we all have to answer the difficult questions. Like, we're in the most absurd position. We are mind inside of this external world of objects and things and time and space. We don't know why we're here. We just awoke into this absurd position. I mean, I want to call it absurd because it's absurd compared to the structure that I think I live in, but it's actually the structure I think I live in, which is absurd because I'm missing the whole picture, which is, I don't know why. We don't have certainty about anything. We don't have the answers to anything.
Well, that's where, like, for me, where I came to the conclusion that I just don't have the capacity in me for faith, is for the fact that there's a cool little Japanese proverb. People that live in the past are depressed. People that live in the future are anxiety, and people that live in the present are at peace. So for me, just trying to come to peace with the fact that the here and now is all I have. I don't know what's next, and I don't think anything anyone has ever said before me has any idea either.
We have ideas. We have plenty of ideas.
Oh, there's
ideas are
lots to
guiding the
talk
world.
about.
Ideas are guiding the world. Do we have certainty? No.
No. So for me, I'd never found the need for religion because I'm quite at peace with the fact that I'll find out when I knock off.
Okay, so there's like so many like ways I want to go.
It's kind of loaded with that one, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so many ways I want to go with all this, but what do you mean by religion? What do you mean by faith? Like I don't understand exactly.
I think there's a separation of faith and religion, because I think you can have, I have a friend that she's wicked smart, and she does not believe in the Christian religious structure.
What is that? What's the thing that she doesn't believe in?
Okay, so your hierarchy that you were discussing, the whole structure that's been built around the religion, the Bible, just that whole framework, that structure, where she apparently read the whole Bible, which I thought was wild because I haven't met many people that have, and she considers herself a Christian, but she completely separates herself from the idea of Christianity as a religious framework. Like, she doesn't need to go to church. She doesn't have any symbols or anything in her house for, like, nothing. She's just like, yep, good chance that's it, and carries on.
Okay, so my problem with this is that's not Christianity. Like, I know I'm being really critical. I don't know her, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't believe, and this is back to Descartes and Occam, I don't believe that Christianity is the the propositional statement without evidence of certain axioms. Like, I don't think that Christianity is, I believe certain propositions, and that's what, like, and again, that's what Protestants and modern people believe that religion is and Christianity is like, it's basically propositional.
I think she's actually more in line with how you think versus the fundamentalist Christianity.
Probably. Okay. So I'm not, I don't, I'm not making this about her.
Yeah.
But to me, it's not like the belief requires action. And so, like, in a lot of ways, yeah, she probably is very similar to me in that, like, I'm kind of stuck in this, like, alone spot where I don't have anybody who sees things in their ancient way. I live in a culture and a time where everybody is a materialist, and I'm a lot of a materialist. And I don't mean materialist as in I want a fancy car. I mean ontology. People believe that things are their matter, and even God is like this being, this supreme being amongst all the other beings. So in a lot of ways, like, yeah, I'm probably similar to her. But to me, I'm like, if what she means when she says, I believe I am a Christian, if what she means is I believe, these certain doctrine pieces, maybe by what you're saying, it's the opposite of what she believes. But if what she's saying is like, what the typical Westerner thinks a Christian is somebody who believes that there is a supreme being who created the world, lots of them think like 6,000 years ago, and then Jesus died and was resurrected in like a physical way that is just in the same kind of physical way as like me and you are sitting here today. And if you can just say those propositions and believe them to be true somewhere in your like homunculus brain back there, if you can just believe it for a minute, then that's what it means to be saved, and then you go to heaven, and heaven is a place you go when you die. I don't subscribe to any of that.
Yeah, that's why she departs from the whole thing, is she fundamentally disagrees with that proposition.
Right. Okay.
And that's what I share the same view. And
I don't disagree with that proposition, by the way.
That's why I separated myself from religions in general, is because I can't get behind dogma.
Yeah. Okay. So my difficulty is that I think that Christianity is participatory. So, like, you need to have your life structured. Your life is structured unto a certain thing, and then you participate in that thing. And so it can be yourself. It can be the pursuit of revenge, like school shooters is a great example of that. Or it could be the pursuit of love, and then So you said that she does identify as a Christian, right?
As far as I know.
Okay, maybe we should stop talking about it because I don't know.
Yeah, she has a really neat spiritual viewpoint that is very Christian. That there's a God. Jesus probably lived, but the absolutism of the Bible, the and the ways that it's been construed and everything, she separates herself from that. And where her and I really got along in talking about these conversations was the fact that, like, that's what really put me off of having anything to do with it. Was I'm really into history, and seeing the ways that it was perverted to cause people to do things, like any number of unimaginable things to other people, which always seems to be completely in conflict with what I understand, or what I've always been told the teachings of Jesus was. Like, I thought the whole point of Christianity from after he passed was that you're not supposed to be as violent. And it seems like the violence has increased since then. Like, look at the Crusades, look at how many things that happened along the way. And both sides of the fight in World War II were both saying God was with them.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So for me, like, I look at history and I look at what I have been taught, and it's just, I just can't get behind it. But however, it was like after talking to our coach, and then oddly enough, you and I got into our deep conversation, and I think like the fundamentals for living a really holistic, um, happy life is in the religion somewhere. It just seems like it's got a whole bunch of stuff buried on top that's preventing people from getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. And my sense is that your image of what the religion um, is is given to you as it's given to everybody today, given to you through like a really, I think kind of through Nietzsche's lens, like through a really critical lens. And there's a lot of Nietzsche's criticism of Christianity that I really appreciate. But I think like, for example, if you were to hear from a science textbook in school or from CBC right now, something about Christianity, there's no chance it's going to be positive. It's not going to give you what the depth of that thing is. It'll give you all the crap buried on top.
I know.
And that, I think, I blame the Christians in a lot of ways. I blame people who are lying about Christianity from the outside, sure. But there's also a lot of evil within Christianity that's not going addressed. Like, I don't care about the church growing in quantity. I care about it growing in quality. I want it to be pure so that those things can't be said of it. I think if you, yeah. So I think like the idea of Christianity that anybody has been given, it's really hard to get like that core goodness until you really have to like find an individual who you trust for some reasons. The fact that you've already had to like trust Mario and me to not kill you when we have the chance, and like that's probably helpful.
Well, there's one of the things that I can't remember where I heard it, and who said it, but it was all good ideas don't need to be defended; they only need to be shared.
Yeah, or
So
just lived out purely. Like,
yeah. So if it's such a great idea, why are we currently watching so many people that identify as Christian get so wound up and angry about other people having an opinion about it?
Yeah, I think because sure they identify as Christian, but I think all of that is them not being Christian. Like, clearly, if you go by what Christianity actually is, yeah, people become totally fundamentalist. I think that, like I said, like we're in this crazy, absurd position, and we don't have the answers to the universe, but we're in this place, and not only are we in this place of like, we don't know what we are, we're mind inside of reality, but it's filled with like the most insane meaning, like meaning that's overwhelming. Like you're put in a position, like I'm put in a position, let's say I just woke to consciousness 5 minutes ago. I'm put in a position, let's say I have all of my memories, and like, you know, Descartes' demon would tell me that. Actually, I have no way of proving that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
But, and yeah, no, that's absolutely true. But I'm put in this position where like my family, for example, life is so meaningful that they matter to me. Whatever I am, I don't know what I am. I don't know what this whole world is, but I'm like, it's so meaningful that if something happened to them, I would be, whatever I am would be completely destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, it seems just so absurd. And then not only that, but something is going to happen to them. We're all going to die. Like they're going to die. I'm going to die. Everybody in 150 years from now, everybody who's alive is going to be dead. So there's all these difficult questions. So let me use Vervaekian language. The pursuit of understanding all these questions is to look at the lens of your own life. So you can look through your lens, your worldview, at the whole world. And then there's something called religio. He calls it. It's the root of what religion really is. And it's to take that lens off and examine it. And okay, I've been seeing my whole life and the meaning and all this stuff in accordance with my philosophy and my theology. But let's have a look at that philosophy theology. And maybe it's a little bit different maybe things are different than what I thought they were. And then you can reframe it, put them back on, and see if it works better. That's all that we can do. We don't have the answers to those questions.
Mm-hmm.
All we can do, it's like Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Do you know about that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's a mathematical problem that basically any mathematical system you have, you can't prove by the rules of the system why the system is legitimate. So the language of the system can make sense, but in that language, you can't prove why the language is valid. So all you can do is you can make a theory or a system of mathematics, and then inside of that system, you can see if it makes better sense of the world than the other system. That's all you can do.
Which I think comes back to utility.
Uh,
So for me, when I look at that, because I love mathematics, I was like a total math nerd in high school. So it's funny that you picked that one. The whole point of it, learning it, was to describe the things that you're interacting with in the world.
I think it's a step beyond the utility that you're talking about. If what I want to say is, I think the utility you're talking about is survival of the species in an evolutionary way.
Well, it's making use of it to actually, well, for me, it's to create something new. I use math all the time to create things that weren't there 5 minutes ago.
So why do you want to make something new?
It's compulsion. I've never been able to figure out why creating is so important to me and why that desire to create is absent in so many people.
Okay, so I won't put that version on you. Let me say, I think that the Darwinian way, and like I'm basically a Darwinist, I think that Darwin brought Plato back, because Darwin, sorry, I don't want to miss the conversation we're going on.
Yep.
Let's see if we can get back there, but I want to see what you think about this. I think that Darwin brought Plato back because of this thing of utility. Is like, well, why are we even aimed towards those things? And then you find yourself in Plato, which is, well, the things are, it's the forms in themselves, and we're pursuing the actual forms. I think that Darwin is a rejection of Newton and Occam. Occam is basically, well, I'll just stick it to Newton, but Newton would say that things are their, like the ontology of Newton is that things are their matter, and so everything is made up of matter. Everything is made up of particles. So you can think of this chair. This chair is made up of parts, leg, arm.
You just keep looking down smaller and smaller.
Yes, smaller and smaller, smaller. Newton believed, or Newton's ontology, what's most real is matter. And that's when I say that everybody's a materialist now. Like, I think that's basically what it is. It's from Newton and from science, but we're in this moment, and it's mostly since post-World War II, in my opinion. We're in this moment where that hasn't been good enough. You get to quantum mechanics and you find out that, oh, things act in accordance with our consciousness. Crap. The whole Newtonian physics doesn't work.
Well, the quantum physics is actually starting to apparently take us to the point where they're starting to believe that the universe is actually technically a hologram.
Okay, let's talk about that after. I don't know. I don't even know where to start with that. Hologram in compared to what?
It's primarily empty space. Like when you actually look at the atomic structure, there's more space than matter in the atomic structure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
So
definitely, it's like 99% empty space.
What is the program holding all that together?
Yeah, no, it's all completely mysterious. But the thing is, we have general relativity, which has its theory. We have quantum mechanics, which seems to keep on, or quantum field theory, which keeps on telling us, that the two are not converging.
Well, actually, quantum theory was born out of relativity.
Yeah, but it keeps disproving, or it's not disproving. It's not a matter of like we have a proof on one side and a proof of the other side, but they're telling two different stories. Like one is telling of we haven't collapsed the wave function.
Well, one is linear, one is quanta, so discrete steps. That's where they kind of fundamentally depart.
Okay.
But
I
anyway,
don't know. That's getting and that's getting above like what I understand. Okay, so let's go back before the universe is a hologram. What we're talking about just before that, Darwin's bringing Plato back. I just think like Newton would say things are their matter,
Yep.
And then Darwin would say no, things like the most real thing is what persists across the longest amount of time. And so what we're trying to do is survive, and survive unto an ultimate goal, like unto, well, why are we trying to survive? And then that's why I say that Darwin is bringing Plato back, because things are pursuing. It's like, well, what are we doing through this Darwinian process of, evolution? Darwinian evolution is basically selection, and then variation, and then reproduction. Or I guess I've got that wrong. Like reproduction, variation, selection. And then it's like, well, why are we selecting in this certain way? Why are we aimed in this certain way? but I think that it's
to go with the ebbs and flow of the world around it.
yes, but like what are we aimed at? Like what are we pursuing? Why are we doing it? I don't think that there's a if the world is matter. It's not an important point. All I'm trying to say is that Newton would say that the most real is the matter. Darwin would say the most real is the thing that persists the longest. And I think that comes back to like I can't follow the modern materialism. I think that what the thing that's selecting and doing that whole process of like Darwinian evolution, you could call it consciousness, and by that I'm happy to talk about the difference between like the consciousness that we seem to be a part of like awareness and being able to understand things. But I think that there's a consciousness of all this grass and everything that's at a much different level. Obviously, it is. They're responding to their environment, same as animals. The thing that obviously I think. So this comes from the Church Fathers. The thing that makes humans divine is our ability to give identity to things. There's no objective reason for why this is a chair, like why you can call this a chair rather than it's just a bunch of fundamental particles. Like, I think if you want to be objective, you have to say that the whole universe from beginning to end is just fundamental particles existing in time-space.
Mm-hmm. But they are interacting in a way that separates themselves.
Yeah, but how do you categorize it? Because it does separate itself, sure, but it does so infinitely. I could call this chair, but when I do so, I'm actually using. So this is from a guy named James Gibson who wrote the book, An Ecological Approach to Visual Perception. When I see this chair, I don't see an object and then infer what I do with it. I see a sitting on thing. And when I see a table, it's like, well, what's a table? It's like, does it need to have 4 wooden legs and a flat surface? No. What it needs to be is an eating at place. And that's how we perceive the whole world, all the way down to babies. If you show a baby a cliff, they see a falling off place and they respond to it immediately before they see, okay, if I fall down there, then they infer what will happen. Mm-hmm. It's not that we see objects and then infer meaning. What we actually see is meaning. That's the Darwinian thing that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. It puts meaning at the fundamental. It puts meaning at the very bottom, and we're pursuing meaning. That's what it does. So you say, yes, fundamental particles arrange themselves in certain ways, but there's no objective reason to categorize them in certain ways. There's no objective reason to categorize this as a chair rather than just its part.
Well, how would you ever be able to communicate that?
What do you mean?
Well, I think it was Stephen Hawking. And they used a clip of him saying this, I think, in one of a Pink Floyd song. It was where we changed was we learned to talk. And learning to talk is what created the description of all the things.
But if we learn to talk, you're assuming that we already see the things for their identity. And then now we're like talking about them. It's that first step that I'm saying gives us that divinity.
Yeah, before we were able to talk, we could still like use a rock as something to hit someone with, and like we knew what they were. We could actually look at things, manipulate the world around us, without being able to speak. Mm-hmm. But our definition and our conversation about them, and our ability to all agree that this is a chair when we speak English.
Yeah.
That came from the ability to communicate.
Yeah, but it's not objective. That's all I'm saying. It's not an objective fact. It's not a fact that this is a chair. Like what it is, not outside of our social structure. Mm-hmm. It's like definitely we all can agree that, hey, we all agree whatever this thing is, let's call it chair. Mm-hmm. I can agree to that. Yeah, and so if you want to call that objective, even that though, it's like that's Darwinian. That's to say that the realness is by its function. Do you see what I mean? We all say this is a sitting on thing, but how come we can say that about a beanbag and a stump and this? The matter that makes it up is totally different, but we give identity to that thing. That's why I'm Platonic, because I'm saying the forms exist, the forms truly exist, and we give that identity to the things, and the ability to give form to the matter. That's what makes us divine. And in the Christian Orthodox view of reality, that's what happens in the garden. That's why God breathed breath into the nostrils of Adam he takes the dirt of the ground and he breathes the breath. It's because he's giving him both the matter and the meaning. So like my fundamental ontology is, and I said last time, I think the biggest difference in all these conversations is always going to come down to ontology. What I believe is most real is like you have to have both the fact of like the time, space, matter fact of it and the meaning of it at the same time.
So why isn't that true for a bear?
What do you mean?
It's, well, bears go through the world, and all animals go through the world, and they know that everything is there, and it's a thing that has a utility.
I think my problem with that is your word no. I think I can basically agree. Like my dog will see something here and they'll respond to it in a certain way, and I'm not going to say that we're in some fundamentally different category compared to like all other creatures.
Yeah.
I think I'm perfectly fine with saying, I mean, like we share like 66% of our DNA with bananas. So like I'm perfectly fine to say that obviously like the big change isn't from monkey to human. Okay, that's a big change, and so I don't want to discount that. But the big change is like no life to life. How does that happen? We don't know. But like life, like this is responding. Each one of these is growing. This grass is growing, responding to its atmosphere, and yeah, like there's a bunch of.
So why do we as a species get stuck with the burden of trying to understand all this, where that blade of grass happily gets to just enjoy the sun?
Exactly. That's because of consciousness. Like we need to define these terms. People always muddle consciousness, agency, mind, like all this stuff. It's really difficult.
So consciousness pretty much comes pretty well from prefrontal cortex.
What do you mean by consciousness? Do you mean awareness?
Our awareness at the level that we're playing at.
Oh yeah, I totally disagree.
It's like it's not coming from the monkey brain. Like we still have that brain.
I don't think there's any reason to say it's coming from the brain at all. I think that the brain, I'm fine with saying all the scientific ways we can see that the brain is a user interface for consciousness, but there's no objective reason to say why we are aware. Like that's the hard problem. Have you ever heard of the hard problem of consciousness? It's a philosophical problem that the materialists have run into since like the 70s, which is why are we aware? And there's no answer to it. And I would say there's no answer because you got the ontology wrong. It is, so the hard problem of consciousness is the problem of why are we like actually aware? How come we're not just operating like a robotic system?
Kind of like an animal, just following its instincts.
Yeah. Why are we actually aware of it though? There's no objective reason for that. And there's no, so that's what mind is. Mm-hmm. So the more ancient and I keep talking about Plato. Plato was more of an idealist, and I mean that in terms of ontology, that consciousness is what's most real. And this like outside external reality is like a secondary effect of what consciousness is. But consciousness is the real thing happening here. And then now we have materialists, which are like, no, the matter is what's happening here. Time, space, matter, since the Big Bang to the heat death. That's what's actually happening. Our awareness is just this like happenstance epiphenomenon.
So what if Vervaeke was talking a lot about the Taoist view, and with the yin and yang?
I love that. I'm on board.
It was really cool. But what if that's actually where reality is? It's the thin line between the two.
That's exactly what I believe. That's what I mean when I say the meaning and the fact.
Yeah, your consciousness is where your consciousness comes into contact with the physical reality, and you have to be.
I like what you're saying right now.
you actually have to be able to take what your brain comes up with, or your soul or whatever is thinking in the background, and test it against what you're actually seeing in the physical world.
Yes,
and where the two come into harmony is your reality.
Exactly. That's like you're in a way restating what I believe is most real. It needs to be the meaning of the thing, which is the consciousness element, and the fact of the thing, which is the matter element. It's the heaven and the earth. Like man is, and the word Adam in Genesis means man as such. And like the story of Genesis, I think you probably know this by now, but I don't care whether or not it's literal, because I don't think there's such a difference between literal and metaphorical. We can talk about that. Maybe that'll be helpful. But like, I don't care whether it happened in the same way that like I am sitting here right now, if that makes sense. What I care about is the truth of the story, and the story is definitely true. And the story is that man as such, which is what Adam means, man as such is the spanning of heaven and earth. He's both matter, and he is spirit. And so you combine the two. That's what our entire Christian mythology is based on, is the idea that the grounding of all being, the source of all of reality, has made us to be both matter, and we see the world. We have this external reality, and we have this body, and that's why Christians have an emphasis on the sacredness of the body. We are matter, but we're also spirit. And so God, the grounding of all being, breathed into Adam, man as such, with spirit. And so that's why, so when you're saying like everything needs to be both the matter and the meaning, that's Christian. You're restating Genesis.
So is it all, maybe it's just the point of life is just for a soul to mature.
Well, mature onto what though?
That we get to find out when we die.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree.
Like, so like for me, it's like that's
mature unto love. I believe it's mature unto love. And I think that love is the grounding of all being. So we are like God's essence, the divinity of us, not just like our ability to have like rational thought and stuff, but the divinity, our ability to give identity to matter, our ability to span heaven and earth that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That is what is considered divine. And so any creature with that capacity, our entire social structure is built upon, you treat that thing as sacred. You don't get to kill those humans, people. You don't get to kill any person because they have that divine capacity. It's godly. And so what I'm saying is my belief of what's really happening is that divinity is God in us. And so Christians have different language. We say we have the Holy Spirit in us. People say they have Christ in their heart. These types of things is people. In the Eastern religions, namaste or namaskar means it means the light within me bows to the light within you. That's what it truly means. Like people just say it as hello now, but the Eastern religions,
everything gets watered down.
yeah, it's watered all the way down to just hello.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is our Eastern religions, Western religions, like what religio really is grappling with what is this light within us? What is this divinity within us? And so what I believe, and what I think is inevitable, is that divinity is pursuing unity of everything. And so you, like Tillich, for example, says faith. You've said the word faith over and over in terms of like propositionally believing something that you don't have the evidence for. I don't think that's what faith is. Faith means, the word believe comes from the word galeben, which means to give your heart to. It means to trust. It means, it's like, don't think of it so much as, so like my belief in Jesus, for example, I don't think of it so much as like, I believe in that proposition, and now because that proposition's true, I need to do this. I think of it more of like, I'm going to courageously assume that is true. And I call it courageously because I know that it brings suffering to myself. I know it brings suffering to my family. In certain ways, it's like I'm sacrificing all these other things to courageously assume that self-sacrifice for the sake of God is the best thing that I can do. And that's what my like Christian belief at its core really is.
Okay.
And so it's like, so I don't need the propositions. To me, it's participatory. It's, I'm going to participate in this narrative and trust it. And I think that as Christianity, as religion has become propositional, that's when, that like Nietzsche says, that's when they kill themselves. They're killing themselves by becoming so propositional, tied to these fundamentalist definitions of things.
So rather, like Nietzsche said, we killed God. Maybe we actually just killed faith.
What do you mean by faith?
Well, you just said your definition of faith is different than the one that I was describing.
Yeah.
I like the propositional faith is the way that I understand faith.
Right.
And I have absolutely no utility for it.
Okay, yeah. So we're on board. Let's just call it propositional faith.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm on board with that. So Tillich, I mentioned Tillich. Tillich says faith is to pursue to ultimately pursue that which is most ultimate. And so it just means it's in two ways. Like you could think of it mentally, it's what we're doing now. Faith is to grapple with the most difficult questions. Sure, it's what I do for the last few years, somewhere between 3 and 5 hours a day. Like study the best that other people have to give me in terms of philosophy, theology. That is like, sure, in terms of the mental stuff, yes, but it's more than that. It's so he says it's to ultimately pursue that which is most ultimate. So then I see all of reality is based upon love. It's based upon unity. It's based upon things unifying. That's what God is. God is love. And so I participate in this narrative of I am ultimately pursuing that which is most ultimate. I'm trying to become love. Like that's what my faith is. I'm trying to become love.
So for you, faith is the arrow.
What do you mean? The direction?
The direction that you're traveling.
Yeah.
Because you surrendered to this concept of Jesus being born, dying for certain reasons, doing certain things. You've taken on that, and you believe that to be true.
Yeah, the truth of what that really means, like the I'll just say the logos of those things, of Christ, God coming down for the sake of being a pure person who then sacrifices himself for the sake of love. The truth of that is what I subscribe to. I don't need the propositional faith to it. I don't need the story to be like, yeah, just like how I ate spaghetti last night, Jesus said these certain words and he like all that stuff. I'm like, sure, like I'm fine with it. I don't have any problem with people believing that propositionally. I don't need it because I believe the form of it. Like that to me, let's say it this way. The propositional faith is like Plato's shadows on the cave. Do you know Plato's cave?
No.
Okay, so Plato's cave is in Plato's Republic. He gives this image of what we see in all of reality. Every thought that we have is we're in a cave. We don't know what reality really is out there outside the cave, but what we have is these shadows cast on the cave. This is like straight from Plato. This is not me. This is Plato. And so what we have is shadows dancing around on the wall of the cave, and we're stuck inside here, and we don't know what those shadows are really pointing to. There's a form out there outside the cave, and we're just seeing the shadows of it. And so his like Plato's pursuit, and which I think is the Christian pursuit, is you want to let go of the shadows that you see and pursue the actual form. You want to exit the cave, and then what you want to do, which is very Buddhist, or actually it's the opposite of Buddhist, but it's what Buddha actually did, which is once you get to, so in Buddhism, you like go to nirvana, and then you stay there, and you just become like one with everything, emptiness. But then what did Buddha do when he got to nirvana? As the story goes, he goes to nirvana, and he comes back to tell everybody. It's like, that's not Buddhist.
So the whole thing is like, so there is a problem with fundamental, like current Buddhism and what I understand to be the original Buddhism.
Definitely. If what you mean by current Buddhism is Western Buddhism, I can't stand it.
Well, I think even Eastern Buddhism it's not the original from what I understand. It's like, it sounds like.
In some places, like where I spent my adult life, like we lived in like real Nepal.
Yeah.
Like the Nepali family we lived with didn't speak English. It was 3 generations of Nepalis, and like we didn't have anybody we barely interacted with other Westerners. They have lived the same tradition for thousands of years. Unbroken tradition.
Yeah, but
anyway, sorry. So I'm just saying some places they do still live the same.
What really I find fascinating about the what I understand to be the original concept behind Buddhism it wasn't supposed to be a religion. It was supposed to be a theology. It was supposed to be just a way of relieving suffering. There was no.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the only religion that doesn't have a deity. Buddha never sat himself as this all-knowing being in front of everyone. He's just like, I would just like to show you how to stop making your life suck.
Yeah, no, totally.
So that's one of the reasons why I always thought he was kind of neat, or that line of thinking was interesting. It's very similar to what I understand you to believe about Christianity.
Yes.
Minus the Jesus part.
Well, sort of. It depends what you mean by the Jesus part.
Well, it's like Jesus, from what I understand, like and from you describing it, is God putting himself into a physical form that we can see, touch, feel, um, lands on earth,
Yes.
grows as a human, then transcends the human form through crucifixion and ascending to heaven.
Yep.
So, but his teachings before he died that got him the following and everything else like that seems to be not that different than what Buddha was trying to do. And that was just to
Yep.
relieve suffering and get everyone to just hang out without being a dick.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. Like or I shouldn't say totally. I mostly agree. It depends what you. So when you say that God became man, like so what Christ is, and this is not just me. This is like the way that the church believed for 1,000 years before the Great Schism. What Christ is he's the most human of all humans. He's like the thing that's at the core of all of us. The thing that we all share is that light within, that divinity, that ability to identify things and judge things. That's the thing about it. Because as you identify things, you're judging their utility unto, does this serve love or not? And so that's why Christ is the judge. And at the end of the book,
by utility too.
everything lives by utility. But it's utility. There's no such thing as life. Nietzsche says truth serves life. There's no such thing as like truth that's not captured within life, like and survival and like where are we going? Definitely. But so yeah. Everything is captured within utility. I'm a pragmatist. Like in terms of my epistemology, I am a pragmatist in. I was telling you last time about William James, because it's this grand thing of like, oh, this is what that utility is, and now I can tell you what it is. It's like no, I'm a pragmatist by like through the humble path. William James' like statement on pragmatism. He's like one of the maybe the top few American philosophers ever. Nobody knows about him because people hate pragmatism. But William James was he believed that truth is and we can start talking about pragmatism, but I don't want to get off of this light within Jesus stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, let me just say one sentence from William James, which is I believe in pragmatism as the ultimate form of truth, not because it says something, but because it's the only path by which I can say anything. It's like you can only see things by their utility. Every word I have is pointed towards a goal. So like pragmatism is the hallway by which you get to any other epistemology. That's the only reason. And so yeah, like I think that we will always be constrained to pragmatism as the only form of like truth. So yeah, when you say utility, that's basically a similar thing. It's like we're aimed towards something, but then it's like, well, what do we aim towards?
Well,
And
the
then-
weird thing is just like if I look at my own life, like I started with very little. My mom was 16.
Wow.
Like we had nothing. And then we eventually ended up with more and more, and life got better. And then I look at my life now, where I guess technically I have the American dream. Got a wife, I got a boy and a girl, and like the nuclear family. I own a business. Like I've got everything.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm any happier.
Right.
So that's where the materialism fails, because it's just, for me, it's just stuff. And I'm finding that it's causing me to spend unbelievable amounts of time on stuff that doesn't bring me joy.
Yes. Yeah.
So like now I actually find myself paring down, now that I've got access to just about everything.
Yeah.
I'm finding myself looking at things in terms of, well, the utility is pointed towards joy.
Yes.
And
Totally. I'm like 100% with you.
a lot of the joy usually involves the company of another person.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy hunting because I end up getting to go out with people that I find are interesting and have interesting conversations. But also it takes you back to our early ancestors in the pursuit of sustenance.
Yeah.
But I look at the universe differently since I started hunting. There's people that just really frown upon hunting. It's just like, I've never been more appreciative of the world that we're in. Then after I started watching animals live, like
Yeah.
what causes them to move and stuff like that. So,
And die? Like, is that part of it?
yeah, it's
Because that's
I really hate that part. There's the only reason why I think I can actually complete it. Like I tried to understand like how do I actually pull the trigger or let go of the bowstring, and I think it comes down to the fact that there is somewhere in the back of your head, it's just like that's a walking cheeseburger, and it's like that. That's the part that allows you to actually do something that is actually really horrible.
interesting. I maybe I come at it from the same position, or maybe it's opposite. But tell me what you think of my system when I need to pull the trigger. Is not that it's. I wouldn't say it's horrible because I would have to say horrible compared to what? Because we live in reality. Is the alternative that I kill myself? Because that's the only way I'm gonna not have to kill other things to eat.
Exactly.
So it's like horrible compared to what? So when I see it, I see when I have to kill an animal, there's a true mourning that I have for that. Like
yeah,
a true.
I actually like when I go up to it, it's like I actually put my hand on it and I say thank you in my head.
Yeah, because that thing has been working and I believe, and I think that if you actually want to pay attention, sorry for all the hundreds out there,
Yeah.
I believe there's plenty of scientific evidence, to say the least, that they have similar emotions to what we have. They're like scraping every single day, almost every single moment, fighting against the pangs of hunger. They're trying to survive. They probably love their kids, like all this stuff. And they definitely sacrifice for their kids or some animals do in different ways and do it. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is like, that is for sure the case. To me, I see it more of, there's a mourning to it. Like if I have to kill an animal to eat it, there's a mourning to it, but there's also like I believe, so maybe my hesitancy right now is like, the way I'm saying this sounds like such hubris, but I don't think there's any way that we get out of that hubris. But the hubris is this, or the pridefulness is this. It's when I see that, I have to, in order to kill that thing, I mean, even to buy a chicken breast at the store is the same thing. But in order to kill that animal is like, I need to assume that me capturing that thing and ending its life in order for it to serve what I'm serving is worthwhile. That's the process that I go through. It's like, here's basically, let me put it into really easy terms. What I'm doing with my life right now, like the purpose of my life for this section of my life, is basically two things. It is to be a good family and to pursue wisdom. And so like I'm in wisdom accumulation section of my life. That's how I spend a lot of my time. But in terms of what I'm doing from the day to day, it's like I'm going to spend this chunk of my life from my 20s to my 50s or whatever, adopting as many kids as I can out of hell. They're already in hell. Like they're already there. So I happen to be in this absurd position where I can actually save them out of hell if only I sacrifice myself enough to do so. And so like so that's why we've adopted, since our last conversation, we adopted 2 more kids. So like, or at least since the time we were, doing the backhoe thing. And so it's like the point of everything. And so that's why I get to kill that animal. That's what I'm trying to say, is like, I have a justification for killing that thing. And,
Well,
if
for me,
I wasn't,
it's the same. It's to support my family.
yeah.
But I guess for me, it's just like, I guess I can't, obviously I haven't read and memorized scripture, but it was something about mankind being given dominion over all creatures.
Yes.
And I think that's how a lot of people justify their hunting, is the fact that they honestly just believe they're superior over the animals.
Here's the problem. Sorry, I know.
Yeah.
I want to publicly apologize, because in this kind of a conversation, I get like talk overy. I just kind of talk up, and I want to get my point, and I want to see what you're going to say. Okay. The problem with that and why they do that is because of the corruption of thinking that the hierarchy is a dominance hierarchy as opposed to a hierarchy of sacrifice. Like, if So the triangle and the upside down triangle, the true Christian hierarchy is that when you have more authority, the authority that God gives us is not for us to lord over and subject. Like you could see this in the relationship I have with my wife, for example, or our kids is a way better example. It's like I have let's just say my kids is way more clear. I have way more ability, way more authority, way more competence to exist in the world. If I want, I could live by myself in the world and I would be just fine. Kids can't do that. They rely on me. But the entire Christian hierarchy is that by having that authority that God has given me, I'm required to give it up to my children. So that's why there's all sorts of, like, there's scriptures running through my mind right now. Like beware of becoming a teacher, because if you want to teach, you're putting yourself above people, and it requires that you sacrifice in as much as you're going above them. So with the animals, it's the same thing. It's like they're below me. And so I agree with you that the problem is people think that what the world is a dominance hierarchy, but it's actually no. If you are a Christian, if you're secular, I think you can say, yeah, it's a dominant hierarchy. Yeah. But if you're Christian, it's you have to respond to Nietzsche. Nietzsche says the world is a dominant hierarchy and it's a will to power. You're just trying to get to the top. The Christian, what Christ says is, no, the higher you go up to the top, the more you give, the more selfless you become, up until you actually give your whole life. And by the way, that's the way that you defeat death, because you chose it. You chose it all along. So that's how I believe that I'm defeating death. It's like when I actually die, I'm going to be able to say, right before I die, I mean, I'm not going to actually say this, I'm going to be crying and stuff, but like, right before I die, I can actually say, hopefully I can say, oh yeah, I died in every single moment leading up to this. So the actual death here is like, that's just a victory. That's like, I've already won. I've already beat death. So death isn't stealing me. Like I stole death by being Christian. Now, do I do that perfectly? No, I'm not Christ, but that's what Christ did. All I'm trying to say is, like, I don't see the world as So the scripture that you mentioned of dominion is God says to Adam and Eve, he says, go forth in the world and subdue it. So people think subdue means you step on it. No, subdue. It means you give it its proper due, so under you. Like, yes, it's under you, it's you, but you give it its due. Like you give it its proper place. So yeah, like I had a mouse in our bedroom last night. I went through a lot of effort to not have to kill that thing, and I didn't. Like, not because like I would feel sad like to have to kill it. It's like, no, I believe that it has a place in this world. I'll go do what I have to do to save it, you know?
Yeah, well, I think somewhere along the lines, the Buddhist thinking is very similar to that. It's just like, you only take what you need to sustain yourself. And like that,
or like to pursue the goals that you're pursuing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's from what I understand, is the selflessness, the achieving nirvana is not needing man-made possessions.
Yeah.
Not thirsting for power, not thirsting for love, not thirsting for love in the physical.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's very much in line with what Jesus was teaching as well.
Yep.
So
it's also Vedanta Hinduism is very similar. Like, I think at the core of the religions, it's all a very similar story, because the more that they're a real religion, they're like having the same relationship of religio, of examining those glasses.
So why is the vast majority of people missing this fact?
Because because the world is in a process of dying itself. I believe that like the church and the thinking world is killing themselves. And it is through my first person who I have an issue with is Occam. And then Copernicus, and then Descartes. And Descartes is a complete dualist. He believes that there's two different things. There's the soul, which is the mind, and there's the matter, which is the world. And it's like he has complete dualism. And so most Protestants, and like even most Western Buddhists, which I can't stand that stuff, like if you go to like most, yoga places in the West, that drives me crazy, because I know what the actual Buddhist thing is, because I lived it. Yeah. Like I didn't live as a Buddhist, but I know the culture. I know what the culture feel. I've participated in it. Yeah. I couldn't give you all the intricacies of like the theology, But I've participated in that culture, and so then I see what happens in like yoga studios here. I'm like no, you're just like this lost materialist Western Cartesian, and you think that you're gonna escape that by calling yourself like by going on your mindfulness app and like.
I know it's you look at the. I think the reason why Western culture is ripping itself apart right now is the fact that that understanding was lost. And I read a book called *Sapiens*, fascinating book.
Yep.
And in order for human beings to go past the village structure of like 150 to 300 people, they actually had to break, it's kind of hard to describe who they is, but it's like the intellectuals that are trying to manage the overwhelming growth of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, in order for us to coincide as a country, you have to actually break down the bonds of community and create people that depend on the system.
What do you mean?
So, because Canada is a really good example because it's socialist.
Mm-hmm.
So by breaking everything down in terms of if you need medical help,
Yep.
you don't go to your.
Are you familiar with Marx? Like, do you know the philosophy of
Marxism?
Marx? Yeah.
A little bit, but
Because I would want to, if we're going to talk about it, I think I would want to put it into Marxism. But I know what you mean when you say socialism.
so by
Socialism is the political expression of a philosophy. The philosophy is Marxism. It is basic. I mean, it's similar to like the materialism.
yeah,
stuff.
it's an idealism of like everyone benefits
Yes.
from everything.
Yeah.
The problem is certain trades have a requirement of a lot more effort than others.
Exactly.
So that's where
So that totally does away with from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Like
Yeah.
who gets to define ability and who gets to define need.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why it will never work, is because you're always going to get that jaded feeling that you had to work harder to become a doctor,
Yeah.
and you're benefiting as much as the guy that does something very simple.
Socialism will work if it's voluntary.
Which
Okay, so when you say, I shouldn't use the word socialism because that's just way too loaded. Everybody pooling things in for the unity of everybody, that will work if it's voluntary. The
Yeah.
problem is the compulsion. That's the Marxism.
isn't that where communes come from and stuff like that? It's just like
Yeah.
it's a whole bunch of
And guess what? You know what's crazy? All the communes that were started in the 70s, Vervaeke did I don't know if he did the study or if he just made it popular, but they studied, basically, like, long story short, there's tons of communes that came up in like the 60s and 70s after the war. They survived for as long as they were religious. So the ones that were the most religious are still around. The ones that were the least religious died right away. Like the ones that were the most religion of self, it was just like everybody's having drugs, having sex. Those ones were done in like 2 weeks. But the more that they were aimed towards religio, the more they survived, to the point that there's tons that are still
It's
around.
because our species needs an external thing to work towards.
Yes.
Without it, we become too selfish and we end up like a little spoiled 4-year-old.
Yes.
Even as adults, we can see that problem right now. Like all the raiding and stuff during BLM movements and stuff like that. It's just like,
You don't support BLM? How dare you? This podcast is over.
oh, it's just like you see people like they were given a thing to support,
Yeah.
and then they're so obsessed with their own desires and needs that instead of actually dealing with the product at hand, they went and smashed windows and took purses and all kinds of other stuff. And you're looking at it going like,
Yeah, but they were just living out the ideology of their professors, like most Marxist professors. This is something I wanted to say earlier, but this is the right spot to say it now. I believe that everybody is going to pursue religio. So religio is what I was talking about Vervaeke in terms of like you take off the glasses, you examine the glasses, you put them back on. Everybody is, so let me say it a different way. Everybody's religious. I believe everybody's religious, including you, including me, including my kids. Everybody is religious in as much as they're aware and have agency. They're pursuing something. They're religious. I think if you take the dogma out, if you take let me just say religion. No, let me say dogma. If you take the dogma out of religion, then what you get is ideology. And you get, everybody's going to be religious. And so I think I take that as a given. Like everybody's going to pursue some ultimate thing that they believe is like the purpose of their life. Everybody's going to do that. If you take the religion away, then what are you left with? Ideology. This is Nietzsche's poem. Like he's talking to the atheist when he goes into the marketplace and said, God is dead and we have killed him and we will never find enough water to wash away the blood. Everybody's descending into idolatry, and in the next 150 years, or I forget, 150 or 200 years, he said, there's going to be hundreds of millions of bodies and we'll never be able to wash away the blood. That's what Nietzsche says in like 1860s or 1870s. He was foreseeing that without religion, if you remove the religion, then you get communism, you get Nazism, you get all these different isms, which are crippled religions. So I think, so this is something Peterson says. He's like, the whole Catholic structure, people all around the world worshiping in these like crazy looking Gothic like robes, as absurd as it is, I think that's as rational as people can be. It's not because like, oh, we have some like rational way to transcend that stuff. It's like, no, we're going to exist inside of religious story no matter what. What we want to do is organize that story together so that the light within you and the light within me, we're pursuing the same thing. And if I start going off the rails, if I start having some crazy conspiracy theory or something, you and all the other people like you can kind of rein me in and like, hey, no, that doesn't fit in with our body. And our body doesn't, our body is guided by the bodies before it, all the way up to like the saints, all the way back to Christ. And so like by that, Christ and perfect self-sacrifice is what gets to define everything. That's how we get saved from ideology. I personally believe that what happened is we all divulged into ideology. I keep mixing up ideology and idolatry because they basically mean the same thing to me. It's like you put something above God. You're not pursuing perfect unity of everything, which is God. You're pursuing Marxism, or you're pursuing, communism or Nazism or whatever. I believe we didn't get rid of those ideologies at the end of World War II. I think that what we did is we all divulged from religion into tribal ideology, and we happen to be so strengthened by the fruit of the tree, which is technology. We happen to be so strengthened by our scientific methods that now we have nukes. Everybody's like pointed nukes at each other and guns. And so we divulged into ideology, and then we're like, my ideology is going to win. We went to war. 200 million people died because of it. And now we're just kind of like rocking back and forth in the trauma of what just happened. Like, I don't want to be a Nazi. I don't want to be a Nazi. Communism one's not good either. And like, but we don't have the thing that's going to save us from ideology, which is it is the pursuit of what is above ideology. Yep. Self-sacrifice.
So unfortunately, what stops things like that is, like if you go into psychological studies, like go away from the philosophical, they've pretty much proven that about 3% of the population
sociopaths
are socio or psychopath, which is technically, as far as I know, defined as an antisocial
lack of empathy.
Yeah, it's like 100% antisocial. The problem is those people usually, or quite often, have very high IQs and very good at manipulating others. So, we've seen groups come along that have managed to convince amazing numbers of people to do really bad things by perverting either scripture or some other methodology, like Marxism got turned into communism. And it always gets tweaked into some form of control to satisfy a bunch of psychopaths.
So what you're saying is we need a whole hierarchy of self-sacrifice aimed towards love to keep those psychopaths from taking control of all of our sheep.
I think they're too humble. Those people are too humble to actually take care of the psychopaths.
No, what I mean is like what you're asking for is a church. You're asking for a global church. Like I'm trying to like shove you into my box here.
I don't think you can. I think that so going back to Sapiens, and it's funny that you say everyone has a religion. They actually argue that money is the current religion of the world.
Of the Western world.
So,
well, yeah, mostly.
the way they define religion. So it's again we get back to definitions.
Yeah.
Their definition of a religion is a thing that is man-made. It's a description of
Totally
something.
disagree. Yeah, I just disagree with that. I don't know what I mean by that.
Well, it's if the human race was wiped off the planet right now,
Yep.
money would be gone, the Christian religion would be gone. It was everything that has to do with the world of man would be gone. The floating rock in space would still be there.
Yeah. So you're professing materialism as a religious thing right now.
But at the end of the day, it's if you look at the here and now.
What do you mean by floating rock? Hold on. I want to. I don't want to like. I know I'm being a bit mean in the discussion here. I want to drill into this one bit. What do you mean the floating rock? What's a floating rock outside of awareness? Like we need awareness to have the floating rock there in the first place. There's no floating rock if there's no awareness.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the philosophical side of it, which I mean, right now we are currently perceived to be on a rock floating in space. Are definitions of everything perfectly clear and absolute? No, it's all theories. But for the moment, it's the best we've pretty much got.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go back to the idea of religions and money being a religion, currently it's what everyone is trying to get more of. The overwhelming consensus of the average person. Yes, there's a few handful of people that become saints because they give up everything and they're not obsessed with the religion of money.
Well, hold on, because in order to say that, like you have to be able to account. And I didn't read *Sapiens*, but I read it. It was a review or I heard a discussion or something, and basically came away really not liking it. So, because to me it was like it was like I was listening to, what's that guy? Lawrence Krauss. Do you know who Lawrence Krauss is? Okay, secular, atheistic. It's like you have all your theories and theories and theories, and you've never even looked at what's the grounding of all those theories. But anyway, it's my problem with what that part of that part of the book is like, hold on. We aren't machines working only for money. Everybody exists in this difference between like for example, there's a common problem. What's the work-life balance? It's like so everybody is grappling between, do I just try to make more money or do I have a family? It's like if all we were doing is trying to get money, according to that theory, if that was our only God, I would say no, that's not our God. I'd say we're what do you call it when you have lots of gods? Not pantheistic.
Poly?
Yeah, polytheism. Yeah, like this is my problem with Protestants. Basically, I think they're polytheistic. I think that I won't get into that now. But this money thing is a good example of that. It's like, no, we don't have money as our only God. What we have, most people in the world, they have polytheism. They're grappling between the God of money and the God of fertility and like, I want to have kids. I think all of what they're doing is they're pursuing like an endpoint, a goal of their life. And that might be one thing or it might be many things. It might be like,
but if you challenge the bulk of population, everything's based on statistics. Like you are probably one of the few people that I've ever met that would probably die for his faith.
Oh yeah, like I think a lot of people would.
I haven't met very many. There's a lot of people that say
depends what you mean
would.
by faith.
Huh?
It depends what you mean by faith.
Well, I've met a lot of people and had this conversation with quite a number of people.
It's not their faith if they're not going to die for it. That's what I want to say.
Yeah,
faith is by definition the thing that you will die for. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but there's a tremendous amount of people that call themselves Christians or Muslims or Buddhists and stuff. And in a conversation like this, they'd say they'd die for it. But really, when someone's holding a gun to their head, they never would.
That means they don't believe it. That's how I define belief. When I say I believe in God, It's not that I subscribe to a certain set of propositions. It is, and that's why I have a trouble saying I believe in God. It's because it's like, how dare I say that? How dare I say that I really act as if? Because to me, belief is, like I said, it's from Galaban, which is to trust. It's like, it's to act as if something is true. And so, and everybody has that. Like the scientist has that. Everybody has their belief. It's, you act as if something is true in order for your whole life to have structure. And that's what I have. And I want it to be Christian. I want to be a Christian. Now, do I think that Christianity is like, I need to say these propositions? No. But belief to me is you act as if something is true. And so if that person who calls himself a Christian, when it comes down to it with a gun to their head, doesn't profess those things, it meant they never believed it in the first place. That's the problem with, that's when I say I don't care for the church having quantity, because you could have a billion people who say that but don't actually live it out. I care about the church having quality. Is like, if we could just have 12 people, which is what Christ had, he had 11 people who truly believed it, then we would change the world, which is exactly what happened. Those 11 people transformed the world to the point that we're still talking about them.
But somehow the vast majority of people that liked what they were saying are still incapable of living what they were suggesting as a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So, and
So-
that brings us back to the sapiens. It's the pursuit of money, greed, power, and everything else.
Yeah.
It's still, that stuff still captures the imagination of the average person long before the spirituality side of it.
Yeah, and like I don't disagree with that. I think that's definitely the case, and it's a big problem. But yeah, but it's also like you still have to ask, like, well, how come all those people are still having children even though it's not good for their bank account? And it's like, well, maybe we're pursuing more than money. Maybe we're pursuing some sort of a like meaningful existence. Maybe we're pursuing doing good in the world, you know?
What's terrifying is how many people have children because they think they're supposed to.
Yeah.
That's like, there's...
What do you mean?
Well, look at how many kids are completely neglected. Like their parents do their own thing. Like they go to work, they come home, they do their own stuff. They don't spend time with their kids. They like.
So what you mean is they don't actually think they're supposed to, but they, in a really surface way, think they're supposed to, so they get pregnant. But like for me, if I think I'm supposed to have kids, it means it comes with all that like attention and love and like taking care of. It's like.
So there's still the belief that having the nuclear family is the route to being happy. And then when they find out that, you know...
It is in a way, though.
They can't watch...
Even...
It is for certain people, but if everyone was honest with themselves and looked at it and goes, like, I can't even take care of a cat.
Yeah.
What am I doing having a kid?
Yeah, totally.
It's... If you're not prepared to do the sacrificing and giving up...
Yeah. They've been put in a position higher in the hierarchy than what they were ready for, than what they, like... ascended towards, because they were put in this position of authority over these children, but they don't have the capacity to sacrifice. So yeah, all those people, like, rather than thinking that they're going to be happy by having kids and still pursuing their polytheistic gods, what they need is to pursue the one God, which is love. So they need to, the more they will self-sacrifice, the happier they will be. I shouldn't say happy, the more joyful they will be.
So
like,
why is the capacity for self-sacrifice so low in Western culture?
Well, compared to what, though? It's really tough, because, like, Western culture has a lot of self-sacrifice in it. It's the only place in the world, and in all of history, for example, that we have a whole system of saving children from having neglect in their first few years of life. Like, hope, this Western world that's not good enough. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's tough, because the world's tough, because we're all suffering, we're all dying. Yes, but... Like, look at, this is, so I was talking to Lee, because he's, like, really libertarian. Basically doesn't want any kind of systems or anything. And, like, mostly I agree with him. But then I'm also like, hold on here. I'm looking at these pictures of Hope when she was born. And I'm like, hold on. The system saved her. I can't be, like, talking too bad about the system. Because the system saved her and my daughter. And, you know, and all the kids. It's like, compared to what? Compared to some... fantasy of an ideal society, sure, maybe we could be better. That sounds very Christian to propose that. It's like, yeah, well, the Christian thing is to not only propose that we could be better. What I'm trying to say is I agree that we're not self-sacrificial enough, but I think we are in Western culture and Christian, Judeo-Christian heritage. Like, this is the first and only real attempt at self-sacrifice that we've ever had. We were always tribal, and then we started to develop into societies. And if those societies are still tribal, then like now they have nukes, so that's a problem. Yep. So now we have this guiding principle in the West, which is the good part of the West, which is, no, all the humans are divine, and you respect all of them to the point that you pay infinite amount of money to save any single one. Like, we can't quantify their wealth.
I think our march towards large systems is what caused the need for things like nuclear weapons. If we hadn't been in such a hurry to destroy small communities, like, if you look at what happened after World War II, communities really rallied to rebuild cities and get everything going again.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the lines, and they talk about this in Sapiens, was the fact that people have pretty much become silos because we don't depend on each other for survival.
I totally agree with that.
So that's
and then we put ourselves at the risk of a psychopath coming in because we're all in our own individual little spot. And that's what I think that's what the prophecy of the Antichrist is like, definitely what we have, the more that we kill the community and the more that we kill the unity of, like, hey, if somebody has a bad idea, we can at least compare and contrast it to everybody else's opinion. The more that we kill that and we're just like an individual, and I have my individual beliefs, you have your individual beliefs, what we're doing is we're setting things up. We've flattened all the hierarchies, and now we're setting things up for somebody to just take over the whole thing. And what's going to stop them? We have no structure like to stop them. Structure of self-sacrifice.
Hopefully it's not Klaus Schwab. You know he's trying.
Yeah.
That's why we're kind of in a mess, is because we're sitting there thinking that we're all these independent creatures. Social media has made it even worse. That's just gas to the fire. So everyone's sitting on there trying to get likes and thumbs up and stuff like that. And you're looking at it going like, that wasn't the point of social media. Like, really, the whole point was to become larger communities. And now we just have a bunch of wingnuts that find each other and think that they're right because they found someone. It's amazing how off the wall you can become just by finding one person that agrees with your batshit crazy. Yeah.
So take the problem of social media. Let's just take that small thing, make it big. Technology. This is what technology does. Technology, by definition, it makes, the more that we pursue technology rather than love, the more that we become self-isolated. Let me introduce you to Genesis 2. Man eats the fruit. The fruit is technology. It's to take the things of the world for yourself. And what happens? He realizes he's naked. Like, that's exactly it. That's exactly the same thing.
The awareness.
You realize that you're naked. You realize that you've missed the mark. Rather than pursuing love, you've pursued like this dualism. Dualism, what I mean by that is, like, you're trying to take for the world so that you can just, like, it's like a means to an end. You're trying to take from the world so that you can protect yourself from the world. What happens? God then clothes them with skins, I think with fig leaves, or the skins of animals. I can't forget, but it basically means the same thing. It's like an outer layer of protection. Because what you're trying to do when you take the fruit is, like, you're trying to I don't want to be hungry. And rather than following the direction of God, it's like, I don't want to have this little bit of suffering. I'm going to just take from the world. And then you take into yourself. But by doing that, one, you realize that you're naked. And two, you become self-conscious. And that's how we have the capacity to develop nukes. Is like, I realize I'm self-conscious and I realize I'm naked. Well, that means I know how I can hurt you because you're naked and self-conscious too. And so I think what happened is man took the fruit in the garden. It doesn't need to be literal. But over the course of history, and I think that us developing nukes is the same thing. It's man taking fruit in the garden, and I think that social media is the same thing. It's like, so yeah, you asked me earlier, why is everybody not sacrificial enough? Adam took the fruit in the garden. it's not something that happened once. It's something that it's the pattern of all of reality. It's the
Yeah,
pattern of
it's a
human
constant
existence.
pattern.
Man as such.
But you mentioned duality, and I think that comes back to the fact that we've always been binary creatures. So there's a really cool book that I read that had nothing to do with any of what we're talking about, but it somehow does a really good job of describing why we struggle so much. And we've built a machine, the computer, that works on zeros and ones. It's binary. And their discussion was the fact that the farther we get down into computer science, the more we realize that we've actually created a machine that mimics us. It can just go a whole lot faster. Aside from the fact that it doesn't have the soul to be self-aware,
Yeah. Or to give things identity.
it
It can like when I say there's no objective reason that this is a chair, it's the same reason that a computer can't see a chair here. They can analyze it according to the metrics we give it,
yeah.
but it can't give things identity
No,
itself.
but what they were discussing more was the fact that like all computer is based off of logic, and all the logic comes down to a binary system. And the more they look at it and the deeper they go into it, the more they realize that human beings live by the same thing. If you take anything that you like or hate or need or want, and you go down the rabbit hole far enough, it'll go back to a yes or a no. I like it, I don't like it. Good versus bad. It's not surprising that the Taoists ended up with the yin and yang, and it all comes back to A or B.
But to transcend the binary duality, I think what is presented in the creation myth is you ascend the mountain to love. You don't descend towards binary. And so you were saying you want to exist on the yin yang,
Yep.
right on that line. It's like that's what makes us divine. That's what I'm trying to say is like you want to. So logic would be to cohere two different propositions. Rationality is to cohere all of the world. It's like to cohere myself and everything I am to the whole world out there.
So isn't there something in the scripture where they were talking about how is it? Something about straight is the path, and a lot of people misconstrue it to being like straight is the path, and you have to follow the dogma explicitly because you can't deviate from it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that straight is the path is like it's a very narrow band between the converging of the duality of life.
Yeah, and maybe it's infinitely narrow. But that's what we need to pursue. But I think that's what love is. Like, if you think of what love is things to exist reciprocally, but also maintain their identity. So when me and my wife, let's just say I'll use kids as easier again. For what I want when I love my kid is not for them to be captured into my identity. I want them to be fully their authentic, true identity, and me to be my identity, but us to exist in unity. So love, the definition that useful way I get from Vervaeke is like love is reciprocal, accelerated reciprocal disclosure. So it's like more and more of what you are can disclose yourself more and more to what I am, and we can do that more and more and more and more and more. But it's like what you have is maintenance of two different identities living in harmony. So think you have a C and an E, I don't know music, but like C and an E, they're living in harmony. That's beauty. The beauty is the harmony of between the two. It's way less beautiful than if you just have two C notes at the same time. Does that make sense? You have two different identities, and those two identities are existing harmoniously. That's what love is. Like, love is the harmony of things. So love might be the infinitely perfect way in which all things can exist. And then the opposite of love, I don't think it would be hate. But
it's the continued separation, the isolation.
yes, exactly. The separation. And so the enemy, Lucifer, is the one who brings light to the separation of things. Like the enemy is, and that's what I think is demonic. That's why he's the accuser. It's like, you're different from that. That's different from that. That's what hell is. Hell is a place where everything is separated. And that's why I would say
think about the most terrifying thing for a human being. It's not death.
Separation.
It's being completely and utterly alone. there is really nothing worse than being completely alone. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot more of these mass shootings and stuff, is because we have a lot of kids that are completely alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like the system is just dropping them because the system is just not. It doesn't. When it was all built, everyone agreed that Christianity was the way that the system was going to work.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that I agree that Christianity was the correct way to do it, but it was the fact that it was cohesive. Everyone agreed on it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, with the communes that had a religion, they still exist, and the ones that don't,
Yeah.
they're
It doesn't
gone.
really matter that much what the religion is.
No, it's just you need a unifying theory of
Everything.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And that's something else Vervaeke's pointed to a lot is like, not only do you survive as a society, but personal happiness, it's not dependent on which religion you are. It's dependent on how religious you are. It doesn't matter which religion. So personal happiness, there's a whole bunch of metrics like that I like just listened to this yesterday. I should be able to remember it, but it was basically like, it doesn't matter. You don't need to have the right religion. What you need to do is be fully participating in the religion that you are a part of. And I think that's actually true. And I do believe that. And I think that's because the core of what the religion truly is going to be maybe the same thing, or maybe it's a very similar thing, but it doesn't matter. It's like, what we need to be pointed towards the unity of everything. And if we're doing that, then we're loving. Like, then that's what...
Yeah. I don't think it needs a label of Buddhism or Christian or anything like that. It's just, I think if everyone just decided to go with the base code of all religions, and that's live in service of each other, we'd probably be able to start sorting some stuff out. But it seems like fundamentally we're not addressing that one major issue, and that's...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what you'd want to say to every person in the world is like, if you're going to call yourself a Christian, then actually do it and stop talking about it.
Mhm.
Like, don't try and get your propositions out further. This is part of why I don't even want to classify myself as a Christian to most people, because I know what they mean, what they hear when I say that is like, I'm on board with this whole, like, let's spread the propositions thing. And I'm not. What I'm on board for is, no, it's not the propositions, that's the shell. That's the shell around the outside. I don't want to build a wall around the outside. I don't want to consume the fruit. I want to live
I think
out.
the biggest example of that whole problem is
I'm going to steal some of your water.
possibly the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, they actually, from conversations I've had with them, because I couldn't help having a conversation with them,
Yeah.
it's promotion of the faith is more important than living selflessly.
Yeah.
And that's how you get promoted in the religion, is by promoting the religion itself. And I'm like, that's not improving anything.
Totally. No, we're on the same page. We're
So,
definitely on the same
but
page.
unfortunately, I think modern Christianity, and I'm not like, I understand that there's some groups that act differently, but as a whole, seem to be working not as blatantly obvious as does Jehovah's Witnesses, but
It's the same thing, same pattern.
it's very same pattern.
Yeah, that's literally why Nietzsche says they're killing themselves. That's why God is dead. I firmly believe that. I think that Christianity is going through its own kind of death right now. I hope that what happens on the other side of it is a resurrection of more of what we're talking about, where everybody, what Christianity truly resurrects into is like, it dies to its body, and it's not the body. It's like it's
getting back to basics.
Yeah, getting to the
Maybe
real thing.
Maybe that's the second coming of Christ, isn't him actually coming back as a person again. But
Yeah, and I don't care. I'm not even at the point of like, I need it to be a person or not a person. I don't care. What I care about is the thing at the root coming back.
The fundamental teachings coming back to utility.
And in a way they are. I think in a way they are, as a form of like a arc. And we're going through this crazy re-enchantment and the death of Christianity at the same time. Like, at the same time that we're having the death of Christianity, we're also having, it's totally acceptable in our secular humanist world to do all these crazy religious superstitious things as long as it's not Christianity. Things like, you can make an altar of George Floyd and then bow to it, or like the whole BLM thing, like all those riots was such a great example. It's like, okay, so the first time something really happens in our culture, what do? We all get super religious and ritualistic, and like everybody's like bowing down to each other and everything. I don't know if you saw that. Like,
No.
oh yeah, like in America, there's all sort like he was made into like an icon that people worshipped. All this crazy stuff. Like when I say worship, maybe that's different than what secular people would mean, but like people were literally, they had white people bowing down to all the black people in the room, and that happened in like all over in many different cities. But all I'm trying to say is like we're gonna be religious, so we're having this big reenchantment, not only in the embodied kind of way like that. I think that we're having reenchantment in terms of our physics with, like, we've hit the problem of the observer, in everything. And it's the same as Gödel's incompleteness theorem. It's like, oh crap, consciousness is at the root of our entire system. So first you need consciousness, and then you have all the rest of the stuff. And that's religious.
Well, science isn't actually. I think where we've gone wrong in our school system is science isn't supposed to be a religion. It's supposed to be a manner of describing the world as we know it.
Right. It's a
And
more
it's
and
supposed
more
to grow and evolve.
Yeah,
It's
but
not supposed to be a theology.
exactly, yeah. And so it's absurd. It's actually a contradiction of terms to say follow the science, because what you have is, so when they say like follow the science about like COVID policy, what they really mean is follow our narrative, and we will use science to prove our narrative.
Yeah, unfortunately, science was supposed to be the purest form of human curiosity.
And I love like that. What I think that is really good and needs to be redeemed. It's actually science. I'm all for it. So the word that religious people use, a word I like, for the problem of it is scientism. Science is good. Scientism is when science becomes like a religion, and all it is you're hiding under your own whatever religion you want, like whatever polytheism or whatever you want of whatever you're serving, and then you just use science. But it's like they say follow the science, and that means such and such COVID policy. It's like, hold on, what do you mean follow the science? Which science? You talking about the science that shows what's going to happen to our economy if you shut it down? Is that the science you're talking about? Oh, you're not talking about that science. Well, why not? It's like, well, the reason why not is because you're actually following a narrative. Speaking of Klaus Schwab, he has a new book called The Great Narrative. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, so he's right on board with he understands that what we really are doing is a narrative right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and so I'm all for science. I would say that's just to come at what I said, Tillich says about faith. Faith is to ultimately serve or pursue that which is most ultimate, from Aristotle. Like, Aristotle is the father of science, and it's been twisted. Aquinas said that what we need, and Aquinas must have been like 1200 AD or something. He said what we need to turn Aristotle into a useful science is mathematics, which I thought was pretty true. Like, that's the difference. But then it got twisted and it became materialistic, and like, yeah, I don't follow it to there, but I'm completely in support of science. But yeah, it's so another way I heard Vervaeke say once about science. Science is, all you're doing with science is you're getting an ever more defined picture of the shadows in Plato's cave.
Yep.
So we can look at like those shadows, we can get a better image.
They're becoming less fuzzy.
Yes. So now we have like, okay, this chair it's like, maybe really simple person could say like, okay, but it's made up of like 6 different parts. And then you could go further. Those are made up of molecules, made up of atoms, made up of particles, fundamental particles. Everything's just fundamental particles in time.
At the end of the day, though, I think the goal is to actually understand the mechanics that holds it all together.
That's a pursuit of God,
Yeah.
I think. Because
So
you're asking, what are
maybe that takes you back to the garden. Maybe it's trying to get back to it.
Yeah, no, I think I'm comfortable with that. If what you're doing is wanting to understand the laws for the sake of love, then yes. If what you're trying to do is understand the laws for any other reason, then you're consuming the fruit in the same way that you're building nukes or whatever.
Yeah, it's not any better.
Yeah, it depends what the purpose is. That's asking you to find out the laws, right?
Yeah. Good versus evil. So, I think the best way to end this conversation would be defining atheism.
I mean, I find that to be easy because I used to maybe I told you this before, but I used to debate on a online forum called the Atheist Experience. Have you ever heard of that?
No,
Yeah. So one time I sat there for 11 hours. I was only actually debating for 7, but I sat in the same chair for 11 hours. But yeah,
that's pretty intense.
yeah, It was me, and at one point there was kind of another guy on my side, but it was basically me against 12 people on an online forum thing. It was pretty good. I also spoke to Matt Dillahunty, if you know who that is, popular atheist, and it was an awful conversation. Anyway, okay, defining atheism. Okay, let me say a few things. I disagree with that which the atheists and the theists agree upon, which is they both come to the argument with a presupposition of what the argument is about, and I disagree with them. Like, they are arguing about, is there a supreme being or not? And then the atheist goes, there's not. And the theist goes, there is. Like, I think I have a form of, it's similar to like non-theism.
See, I always took atheism to be a non-theist.
Okay, so let me yeah. So when you talk to an atheist, like, you get most of what you get. I shouldn't say that. Sometimes you get the vitriolic, really anti-theist kind of a person. Usually, I think what that is somebody who is really burned by theism, and then they get like vitriolic about it. But mostly, and this is why I really like a lot of what's going on in atheism, is you get people who are truly like pursuing reality minus the like dogma and like all that stuff, and they're just like, I want to know reality as it actually is. So like I don't really have much of a problem with atheists. I think that they are arguing, the ones who are arguing, they're arguing against a form of Christianity that I don't subscribe to, like the fundamentalist version. So I'm not mad at them. I'm mad at the Christians for losing their way and for pointing more and more towards the fruit of the tree and less towards Christ.
Well, like for me, it's like what I understand the average Christian thinks an atheist is more of a nihilist.
Yes.
Which I don't think, and if
That's right.
most scientists would consider themselves atheists. Like as a majority, we tend to be atheistic people.
I think agnostic.
Well, see, it depends how you define agnostic. Agnostic is more of like a wishy-washy thing where you're just like, I am spiritual, or I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. There might be a God, there might not be. It's just like, it's so indifferent that like you have nothing.
But they profess agnosticism. I mean, like, by statistics, most people who, I actually don't know about scientists, but most people in the West are now like agnostic. They have no religion.
Yeah.
Or they call themselves no religion. But
so, like, I think a lot of the fight for, like, we use terms too much in Western society, but we've never actually sat down and clearly defined what the difference between a theist, an atheist, and an agnostic really is.
Yeah.
And I think
a
that's
non-theist.
where, like, to me, the non-theist was the atheist.
Sort of.
So what's the difference between an atheist and a non-theist?
Well, okay, so an atheist, yeah, most Christians think, when they say atheist, they think somebody who argues that there is no God. But then when you ask most genuine atheists, they say, no, I don't believe that there is no God. I just don't believe that there is a God. Like, I'm just not going to subscribe to the theism. And so I think that they end up being agnostic, or in their profession. The difference between non-theism and atheism, I think it's a difference of goal. Like, I wouldn't say I'm just a non-theist. I would say I'm a Christian non-theist. Like, it's like, to just say non-theist, it's like I have no goal. That's all it's saying. And so it kind of would have to become like nihilist. But I would say, to the degree, I'm not actually saying right now that I'm a non-theist. I think it's more complicated than that. But because the thing about like non-theism, and this gets back to some of the stuff we're talking about Buddha and stuff, is like, if the world is just matter, then I'm totally fine with the idea that God is the grounding of all the matter. But if the world is matter and meaning, then you need a grounding of that meaning. You need a grounding of consciousness. It's like, well, you need something there. So God can't just be an arena. He needs to be the grounding of the arena we live in, but he also needs to be the grounding of the agency that we have. That's the good part of personifying God, is like, man, like we have this agency, and that's a complete mystery too. Like we live in this world, that's a mystery. We have agency, that's a mystery. Well, what if the two are actually unified into one, like, God? And that's what I believe. Like I believe that God is the grounding of agent and the grounding of arena.
So the problem is, like, what do you do with a person, like, I know a lot of people like me, where we use the moniker of atheist because we don't subscribe to a religion at all. But
I just want to have a conversation. Like I don't care about what you profess to some random person wherever. What I would care about is in a real conversation. I'd be like, okay, but do you want the world to be unified? Like, I don't think that you and I have much difference in what we act out. Like, I think that we have grown up in 99% the same story all the way up until like a few little differences maybe. But like in terms of what we act out, we're acting out pretty much the same story. I'm not about to like rip somebody's nostrils out and eat them, like, you know.
Yeah, but that's why I kind of was interested in the definition of the atheist. So now we have like 4 different terms, and I don't know that I really fit under either title.
Yeah.
So that's like where Western culture has a problem right now is there's a fight between the religious people and the non-religious people. And religious people tend to have, well, actually both sides seem to have no comprehension of how the other side can be doing what they're doing.
Not only that, but we have all these systems where even if we do comprehend it, that doesn't get shown. What gets shown is the people who don't comprehend it. Like, so think of like the news. You have like, all the news shows is like nobody in the center. It shows the people on the farthest right and the people on the farthest left. And it doesn't matter how many people are more in the center. And so it's the same thing. Because like, yeah, if you ask most atheists, they're annoyed about like the most fundamentalist religious person who's just like completely stupid. And then the Christians, the most annoyed with the most nihilistic atheists. It's like, well, not only are we bifurcated, but then we are seeing the most bifurcated parts, which is kind of inevitable. Like we're always going to pay attention to.
Polarization sells news.
Yeah, well, polarization is that binary eating of the fruit thing. And so I would put that whole problem that you've just talked about of like, hey, we use terms too easily and we use terms too much.
But we don't clarify them.
Yeah, we don't clarify them. And so we just go on and create all these like polarizing problems. That to me, that's the pattern of eating the fruit. That's the pattern of duality. It's like, there's that term. That's that and it's not this. And it's like, hold on. So the opposite of that, so I would say duality is descending the mountain towards the fruit. The opposite of that is going up the narrow path. That maybe it gets infinitely narrow. I don't know. But it's to unify things, and that's what we're doing right now. It's like we're having a conversation, and neither of us fit into any of the terms that we're bringing about. It's like, here's this term, and what does that even mean? And so that's the pursuit of wisdom. And I think that's the answer. The answer is you pursue wisdom. You don't just give a label and then boom, that's what that is.
Maybe wisdom and humility is the ability to transcend all of it.
Maybe not transcend though. That's very Eastern when you say that, and then I want to ask you about that. But maybe not transcend. It's more like to unify all of it, find the best of all of it, and promote that. To transcend, this is the difference. This is why I struggle with Eastern philosophy. Especially in terms of Buddhism, is like, it's basically saying a story of like, okay, there's a coin and the Western person says the good side of the coin is here, the bad side of the coin is here, so we need to do everything we can to get the good side of the coin. And then the Eastern answer, because they're saying the bad side of the coin is suffering. We don't want suffering. So what do? We work ourselves to the bone trying to avoid suffering. That's what the West has become. The East says, you do away with the coin entirely. You try and transcend the idea of suffering itself. And I don't follow Eastern religion there. Um, maybe I can understand it propositionally, but I can't understand it in an embodied way because I see a suffering child and I'm like, no, I'm going to work to fix that.
I think the transcending is the ability to look at it as a whole without needing to keep it all divided.
I
Like-
think I agree. What do you mean?
So transcending from one point of view would mean be above it. Another way to look at transcending is to see it for the whole that it is. So if you're sitting there busy looking at one side of the coin versus the other side of the coin,
Mm-hmm.
you're in that binary state. It could be a multi-sided object that you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that.
Versus
Yep.
if you transcend it, you look at it and go, it's just a coin. You need both, and you need to learn to be at peace with both.
Okay, so let's take that to the life in general, like what life is. And you want to transcend like the simplicity of life, which is like, I just need to get food to survive, or I have this desire, I just need to fill it. You definitely want to transcend that. I agree with that.
Well, so if we could take what I'm trying to do right now, I don't know if it's right or wrong because I'm still on that path of trying to see if it's right for me. And I really like making things, and I like being in nature. So everything that I'm doing is going towards making things and just being out there. I'm actually trying to simplify my life and have less have-tos so I can spend more time with the things that bring me peace. I'm trying to get away from all like the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
Because the American dream has been a nightmare so far.
Interesting. So yeah, so I think that you're putting your finger right on where maybe me and you do have different beliefs or different paths. I see the whole rat race story, and I see the coin of like good and bad, and I feel like what you're saying now is something kind of Eastern in terms of like doing away with it and just existing peacefully in like the moment. And I see the problem of the rat race and the problem of suffering, and I think first of all, like I think, okay, it's definitely a story. It's definitely, it definitely goes along with like narrative. But then I'm like, I just think what I need to do is get into that story and do the right thing in it. So I couldn't face life like the sentence you just said. I couldn't say that. I couldn't say I want to exist in this moment or whatever. And the reason I can't say that is basically something inside of me is going, yeah, but if you just do that, if you just live for today, then that means you're not going to be adopting anymore. And it means that you're not going to be pursuing wisdom because you're not going to be aimed for the final, like the best you could possibly be. Like my life, all of my actions are guided by this internal thing driving me to basically it's just saying how great can you become so that you can sacrifice the most amount. That's basically it. It's like how high can you get in order so that you can sacrifice the most.
So for me, it's the more that I come to peace with what I'm doing and just accept everything for what it is, the more I seem to be able to take on. So by thinking less about it, like up to 5 years ago, I probably would have said I feel the exact same way about you, what you're thinking. Where I'm starting to realize now is like I've sacrificed a lot of now for tomorrow. Well, as soon as I hit 40, I started to realize that I keep skipping today. I haven't enjoyed today basically for just about 40 years, minus a few really good days, all for this idea that tomorrow's going to be better. And I've missed half my life. My whole childhood was spent trying to get out of Quesnel because I was trying to get away from the crazy that I was involved in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was all about getting an education, getting a career. It was always about the next thing. And I forgot to enjoy the journey while I was going through it. And unfortunately, that means half of my life is, I wouldn't want to say wasted because that's a really horrible way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've missed out on a lot of opportunities to really experience the world and be happy
Mm-hmm.
because I've always been so worried about what's next. And I think I've done my children a great disservice because they haven't had as much of my time as they deserved
Mm-hmm.
because I was so worried about making sure that there was stuff there for them tomorrow.
Yeah. Then I think we are on a pretty similar page then. Just the way that we tell it is kind of coming from the opposite side. Because my pursuit of like the ultimate goals that I'm aimed towards requires that I am present in every day. Like I can see that if I'm not present, fully present in everything, that I'm not actually getting there. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Like it's almost like we're both aimed at the same top of the same hill,
Yeah.
and so
One's climbing the north face and one's climbing the south face.
maybe.
Where I think that's a lot of the problem with, like,
So what? Hold on. Can I ask you a few questions about it?
yeah,
Especially, like I'm really curious for anybody who isn't raised with like, I suspect that some of the morality inside of me was just what has been drilled into me from like childhood.
mm-hmm.
So a lot of that I then had to fix because I'm like, oh crap, the morality I grew up with is not what I think is actually right. So now I need to like fix all these lies.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I think it comes from like my childhood. So you having a more secular, let's say, kind of upbringing, like what guides your morality? Like why do you, when you say you're going to live in the now, like why don't you do
Become
things
a
that,
hedonistic
yeah,
barbarian.
like, yeah.
It's, I guess, at the base of it, actually, it was the best way I had it said to me was from a woodworking teacher that I had at university. And he said, the world's ugly enough as it is. I don't need to make it any worse.
But why does that jive with you? Because
Um,
like you could, I mean,
I,
ugly enough, you could go do some pretty awful things,
yeah.
like without immediately seeing that it makes the world uglier.
Oh, you can. I've had to go. I have regrets and things that I wish I hadn't done because it didn't make things better.
Mm-hmm.
But fundamentally, what's behind everything that I'm doing is trying to make something either happier or more aesthetically pleasing or functioning better or reduce workload or
Mm-hmm.
it's always trying to relieve stress in some way.
See, and that sounds very like Western to me, for you to be doing all those things. It's like the doing of it is what kind of sounds Western. It's like, well, why are you doing it?
Yeah, well, that's where you get into the joy of speaking about philosophy and theology, is because there's obviously something that drives me to choose better versus, because my dad is a great example of choosing worse.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid,
The fact that you didn't follow him, like
I
you
chose to not be anything like him.
exactly, but everybody who has an abusive or a difficult or a dad who has a problem in any way decides not to be like him, and almost all of them do just like him. So what is with this thing inside of you that's guiding you so strongly to do the good? Like, where does that come from?
I don't know. Maybe I don't succumb to habit. Like it might, the a bulk of your parenting might be habit that's ingrained into you by experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always guessed and tested like
But
I've always done things different. Like most people that are good at making things do have their certain way of doing it, and you can always tell that it was them that made it. Like people that are like some of the greatest violin makers, you could tell their work because they did it the same all the time.
yeah.
You couldn't tell anything that's made by me because it was different every time. I just don't have a habitual pattern.
But you're like working really hard to pursue good in the world. I just don't like. I think maybe I'm asking for language to something that there is no language for. But like, I just don't, because for me, I have a structure in which that falls. It's like, well, I'm pursuing the good in the world because basically I'm trying to fulfill my purpose. Like, I know my telos is to unify the world, is to bring love in my little time that I'm this mind inside of space-time, whatever that's going on. I don't know, but I'm going to try and make it better because that's what I think the story is here. The story is we are given divinity in order to make things better. We are called to love. So I'm going to do everything I can to fulfill my purpose, which is become love.
Well, maybe it's my understanding of the original Buddhist theory was the fact that your soul separates from the main energy source,
Yeah.
whatever you call it, to experience the world and then goes back. And if you did a crappy job this life, you get to try again until you pull your head out and actually do it properly.
Yeah.
For me, I think that might be some of it. Is like I just want to do, I don't know, just do the best with the faculties that I have. I've come to terms with what I am as a person, and that's a builder of things. Some people are a teacher. Some people, like everyone's got their thing that they're really good at, and you just run with it rather than trying to fight it. Because I wanted to be an industrial designer. That's what I really wanted to be, and I found out that I suck at it. I can design machines, but I can't do aesthetically pleasing design stuff. So I gave up on that, and I stuck to what I'm really good at, and I had to find peace with that. And now I'm trying to improve other people's lives, like take away their suffering by helping out with their projects. Sometimes it's for money, sometimes it's just to do a nice thing for another person.
Yeah, so I just have a hard time with this being called atheism because it's so demanding of you. Like, it's demanding.
It drives my wife nuts.
Exactly.
She can't understand why I just don't sit down and watch the birds fly by with her. I don't know what it is. I've never.
It
been
sounds
able to
really
define
similar.
it.
Do you think, like, it sounds to me like it's really similar to what I believe, or the way that when I say believe, like I say, like I don't use that word in terms of propositions. It's like embodiment. Like, I think that we're living pretty much a similar life. Like, compared to most people, we're 99% living a similar.
Yeah, I look at the Bible, like now that I've started going through Jordan Peterson's The 12 Rules for Life. I'm fascinated by the Bible. I think it's a neat collection of important stories for very difficult topics. But I don't think it describes how we got here
Scientifically.
totally.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And I would just say it's describing. I don't think it describes how we got here scientifically either.
I just think I think the format of God that's been presented to me is too simplistic.
Yes, me too. Definitely. So in the face of that, what do? And I think we pursue wisdom. We pursue a better understanding. Or we can just ignore it or like distract ourselves.
I think a lot of it is just calm down and learn how to accept and understand each other.
Yeah. The good of each other. Because, like, I don't want to...
I think Jordan Peterson does a good job of trying to understand the evil in people so he can help
definitely
them.
Understand the evil in all of us, like, but you have to start with yourself.
Yep.
But, like, not promote all of what a person is. Like, love, Peterson says to Vivek at one point, love is the best in me promoting the best in you. It's not just I promote you. It's not unconditional. It's like I see the light in you and I'm going to promote that thing. Well, what are you actually doing then? You're promoting the light. You're not promoting everything that person is. And so that's how, like, I parent, is when I see one of my kids do something good, I'm like all over that. I'm worshiping that. Literally I'm worshiping that.
Well, so to me, it's just, I think that's where teaching as a profession kind of went wrong. And there's two types of teachers. There's a teacher that creates an environment for you to grow in, and there's a teacher that dogmatically speaks down to you. And
Exactly.
I think that's where we get back to where we started with the Socratic versus Aristotic. The Aristotic is I'm going to lord over you and give you the little pieces, and you may one day replace me.
Yeah, that's
And
what it was
then
turned into for
and
sure.
then the Socratic was like, here's the environment. Let's discuss this so that you understand it your way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this conversation's been pretty Socratic, in terms of like, what do you believe? No, tell me why. No, tell me why. No, tell me why. And then you get to, just by doing that, like the Socratic method is so powerful because just by doing that, you have to answer the questions.
Yep. Well, it's like I said, the conversation with our jiu-jitsu coach and ours afterwards, it's given me a lot to ponder. And it's the crazy thing is that interaction has made me go down to the base code of everything I believe, and it's built it up. And some things have been tossed out, and some things have been reaffirmed even stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's just like I now understand that what drives me is utility, and I measure everything by utility, for better or worse. I may transcend that one day.
Can I push you on that? And I'm not pushing you. I hope that I aspire to this being true in all of this conversation. I'm not pushing you so that I can make my point and boom, boom, I'm right, you're wrong.
Yep.
I aspire to it being true that we're pushing each other because what we're actually pursuing is like the logos. It's like the thing at the core of us, the thing at the core of this whole conversation, the thing guiding us. It's like, so.
It's understanding your beliefs.
Yes, understand. You stand under it.
Yeah.
It guides
Well,
you.
It was I think it was Benjamin Franklin that said, anyone can know, very few of us understand.
That's interesting. I never knew that he said that. It's funny because like I've started to think, sorry, I want to get back to what I was going to ask you about utility, but I've started to think more and more I want to answer the question of my belief in God the way that Jung did. I don't believe in God. I know God. It's something like that. It's like, I don't believe in God. I know. But I don't know. I don't even know exactly what's drawing me to that. Yeah. It's more like I'm just admitting that what I truly am, my best, whatever the light is in me is like knows God. It's something like that.
For me, I believe that we're all part of something bigger. I just, out of my desire to become more humble, is I can't, as a human being that has no idea what's next, put a label on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there's so I don't know if you even knew this, but the traditional religions, Judeo-Christian like streams of religion have that written into the whole thing. You don't get to say God's name. So like YWHW, Yahweh, it's actually so the name for God in the Old Testament. The Jewish tradition is you don't even say, you can't give any name to it, and the reason is this is what I believe. The reason is because anytime that you give a name to it, you're confining it. You're taking the absolute and you're trying to shove it into finitude. By doing so,
you're pretending that you understand something that's far greater than you are.
Yeah, and maybe you're consciously pretending or unconsciously, but like you are just by definition. And so, in Judaism, you weren't allowed to say God. What God is, the most defined thing that God is in the Jewish orthodoxy is a tautology. Do you know what that means? It's a saying that says itself. So, and that goes back to Gödel's theorem that I mentioned, where like you can't. The best you can do is make a tautology and see if it makes sense of the world. The world. You can't actually make a system that can define why the system is correct. So I think that God is a, to use Chris Langen's term, super tautology, because what God says to Moses is, "I am that I am," and so it's like I just am. I am that I am. God is a tautology.
It's a placeholder.
Yeah. It's like, don't define me any further than this. But what I am is amness.
Yeah.
I am.
It's a little sticky note that you put on the thing that is bigger than all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And what fundamentally bothers me about religion is it's
writing on that sticky note?
It's a whole bunch of subnotes.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're literally shaved monkeys. Like, how dare we try to describe that which made us?
Yeah. No, I hear you.
It's just ridiculous.
And then in Orthodox Christianity, you were disallowed from making icons of God. And in the same way that there was the Great Schism and people started to define God more and more and put him into this universe, like I said near the beginning, the difference was that we went from the universe being in God to God being in the universe, where we now have God is the supreme being amongst all beings.
But it's living in the house that it made.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the problem. But the
Again,
funny
that's
thing is,
personification is ruining the whole conversation.
yes, exactly. And so the hyperstasis of Orthodox Christianity is that God is the grounding of personhood. He is the grounding of being. Like, God is the grounding of love. But they had a rule that you weren't allowed to make icons. Like, this is like number one rule in religious iconography. And religious iconography, they totally understood that what we need is icons to see. We need something in our daily life because we live in this daily cycle. We need something that we can always just keep pointing to. That's why I don't know if you saw that picture in my living room, the image of Christ washing the feet of his disciples. It's like, to me, our house would be incomplete without the center room having at its center this image of the center of everything, which is Christ. But yeah, like all I'm trying to say is religious iconography, there's a rule that you can't make an image for God, the Father. You can never. And then it was totally scandalous when, whatever that guy's name is, who did those paintings in the Sistine Chapel. And there's the painting of, Michelangelo's image of like God the Father as like a man. That was like complete scandal. But that went more along with the Catholic Church and the Protestant way of defining God.
Again, this comes back to where we were discussing in text messages about I think, whether you like it or not, church is big business. And propagation is, unfortunately, part of the thing. Personification makes it more accessible to more people. And
But that's necessary too. It's not just like, I don't want to say that it's manipulation exactly. Like, so the thing that's good about the personification, so the thing that's bad is what I've already said.
It makes it accessible, but again, we get back to the Eastern thing of being able to transcend the accessibility and get to the understanding.
I think what I struggle with is like, so let's just take a couple nights ago. I forget what, Wednesday maybe? I basically was just having like, okay, I'll put in all sorts of Christian language. I need to get better at defining these things in secular terms for these conversations, but sorry, it's all going to be Christian language from here on out. I was having a moment with God of prayer, in which I was reorientating. It was a religio moment, and this is a big part of my life. This is what guides me, is these moments. And so I was like pacing around in the living room. I think I was crying, or I was nearly crying, or whatever. But like I'm in that moment, I'm fully accepting that the God I'm personifying is not the fullness of God, but I'm personifying him in order to speak to him. Like, I'm speaking to, if you were to ask me my theology, I'm speaking to the grounding of all being and the grounding of all reality. And you've got a butterfly. Oh, it's gone now. It's like landed right next to you there. But like, I know that in terms of, I know that the person who I'm speaking to when I pray is not a person in the way that I'm talking to you. What it is like my conversation and talkingness, the talkingness of talking is the closest that I do get to experiencing the grounding of all being. Like, the highest thing that I touch in my life is the divinity of all other people, and I interact with them by talking. And so it's like, I need God to be personified in as much as I'm gonna talk to him. And so like for example, if my family died right now, I would be talking. Now, I need that. Like, I'm trying to make a case for the personification of God that it's psychologically indispensable, not that it's theologically provable. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. No, I told. That's where this is like going back to the beginning of this conversation where I realized the utility of it and I decided there and then that I need to stop being disparaging towards it because like I don't have that need to talk it out to something the way that you just described. That just doesn't exist for me.
Can you do you think that would happen in a moment of like extreme suffering or something too?
No, I lost my mentor. He committed suicide, and it's
Because doesn't it seem kind of like personification-y for in resentment? Like think of like the Uvalde school shooter, or let's just think of any school shooter. No, let's think of Stalin. Stalin, in his last moment of resentment, shook his fist to God and said, "Why? This is like it's probably myth or whatever."
Yep.
But like it's like, hold on, you were an atheist, so how come you're personifying God in order to shake your fist at him? Isn't it like what I'm trying to? Yeah, I don't know. The thing I'm drawn to is like the thing from your side that I'm finding really beautiful is do you know in the moment in Lord of the Rings when Sam and Frodo are in Mordor and there's are you familiar with?
Yeah.
There's a moment which they see the stars above all of this evil and they see the stars come through the clouds and they basically the text of the actual book is awesome. The movie barely gives it a moment, but it's basically like there's something out there that is so steady and unmoving. It's the arena in which all of this narrative is playing, and I can see that exists even though this narrative is here, and so I want to there's this disconnected kind of attachment to that, and I can kind of see the beauty of it, but like yeah, to me it's like I would find it hard to believe that you wouldn't personify the grounding of your whole story in a moment of like true suffering. Like when your mentor died, like what was it like emotional for you?
A little bit. Like it was, but then I rationalized the fact that it was his choice to depart. He was tired of suffering and the world was too much for him, so he decided it was time to go. So he was done with this level, whatever it is, and it was time for him to go on to the next one. So that was his choice. So why would I mourn him?
Yeah. So what I'm desiring to like see right now is there something that the personification of God, let's just say that, is there something that truly does give me beyond, like, okay, I feel that it's psychologically indispensable, but is there something that's actually true about it that would mean that you should personify the grounding of being as well? And I don't know. The most that I know is something like it's just psychologically indispensable.
I think
for me,
I think we're both basically kind of there. It's just you need to put a name to the medium that you ground yourself through.
Well, I maybe not a name, and there's no name and there's no face.
No, I know. It's
but
like
it's
philosophy aside. It's a way for you to describe.
It's a relationship. Maybe this will help.
Yeah.
It's more like a relationship. It's like the assumption of relationship. It's like this. It's like, you know how if you have real gratitude towards somebody, then that gratitude guides that relationship. Like it guides your actions. I feel like that's what is really at the core. It's not that I need God to be a certain image or a name, or even I don't need to feel like the psychologically indispensable thing is not that I need to feel like he's listening to me in a way a therapist would or something when I pray.
No, but you talk to that which you believe is.
And I know that I am, the purpose for the prayer is me. It's not like I'm going to twist God's arm or something. It's not like I'm changing him. It's that I need to arrange myself to be in relationship with it. And yeah, like the gratitude thing, I think is a good analogy, because if I have true gratitude towards another person, it guides my actions, all the actions that I have towards them. No, propositions aside. So I feel like the thing that's guiding my life at its very core is something like a gratitude towards the grounding of all being, a gratitude towards God, the when you said the thing that's bigger than all of us. Like, I think the thing that's guiding me is a gratitude towards that. And by saying that, I'm like, how is that not relational? It's relational. The only way I know gratitude is with other people, you know?
Yeah. Again, the personification makes it accessible. It's just that doesn't exist for me.
Yeah, and that might be a really good thing though. Or I don't want to say that. I'm just thinking that sounds way further up the hierarchy of understanding than like the fundamentalist, propositional kind of understanding of God that might be more accessible. But
Yeah.
I'm like, I think I'd rather trust you with that, what you just described, to some meaningful part of my life, like trust you to, whatever. I mean, I've already trusted you a lot. I trust you to not kill me when we do jiu-jitsu. I've trusted you, like, we've dealt with, like, money stuff, work stuff,
Yep.
Now, like, a few really deep conversations. Shooting, like, teach me how to hunt a bit. I feel like I'd rather, I trust where you are higher than I wouldn't really care if somebody gives their more accessible super personification of God. Because I've seen plenty of people who do that who don't live it out,
Mm-hmm. That's the action. I think maybe it has something to do with the way I was brought up. I saw a lot of things said, but I saw very little good done. And I chose that. You can say all the pretty things you want. If you don't show up, you're not a good person.
Yeah.
And I had been let down, especially by my father, a lot. My stepfather even more, and other family members as well. They all said wonderful things, and they all said they'd be there, and they just weren't.
It's really interesting. Now I'm thinking, when you say that, I'm thinking, well, maybe our different, like, you come from the North Face, me coming from the South Face, even though we both are in, like, Western culture, I had the opposite experience. I had a father who was, like, not only was there for me, but, like, he was, at least according to me at the time, when the whole world was being formed in my mind from, like, 0 to 7, he was the picture of perfect integrity. And so like, by the time I was, like, 10, I was a really good kid out of gratitude. I was like, nobody had to tell me to be a good kid when I was, like, 12, 13, 14. I was basically like, no, I wouldn't do that bad thing because I couldn't stand betraying my dad. Basically, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, yeah, I'm thinking out loud, but, like, maybe part of the difference is something like I have that son to father relationship that was given me when I was a baby, and, like, now I'm kind of in a similar way relating, because at the time my earthly father was, like, the one who defined everything of my whole world, and now what I believe God is defining everything about my whole world. I still have that same relationship of gratitude.
Yeah, that construct was never there for me.
Yeah, so maybe that is at the core of some of the different, like, not the different spot that we're ending up at, but, like, a different pathway.
Yeah, you came through it by example. Mine's trying to not be the example.
I still struggle with that because I'm like, what the heck is in you pointing you to not do this, don't do that, do not?
Because it hurt me. I don't want to hurt anybody else.
But why not? Because a lot of people do. Like,
I know. It's because that's the easy route. I've never taken the easy route. Somehow I always pick the hardest way to do anything. And it doesn't always, well, actually, most of the time it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I have always learned more because of it. So
Yeah, I think you're pushing me in terms of, like, I'm kind of surprised at how you could do that without the example. Like, somehow it seems to me like then where the flying F did that drive come from? To look at the world and go, like, it's as if you were born with like
It might have
an
been.
example of.
It might have been when my father left. My grandfather came over a couple days later, and he's just like, "You're the man of the house."
Well, that's what it seems like. Like it seems like you. But I'm like, well, yeah, but
But
how did you know how to be a man?
I didn't.
But you knew not to do that, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe I just knew that. Well, it might come back to the fact that I honestly think this is probably at least my fourth time around. I actually believe in reincarnation. I think Buddhists have it right in the fact that like there's things that I've done that I just innately understood with no one teaching me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. So now I'm pretty interested in what you mean by this mind thing that spans across different iterations. What do you mean? Like, what is the mind that goes? What is it that has reincarnated?
The soul.
But what is what is that? Is what my question is.
I don't know. The Buddhists describe it as far as I know, as a piece of. I can't remember if they call it Gaia or something else.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I learned about it when I was in high school, but they saw it as we're all pieces of the whole, and eventually, once we're done our journey, we go back.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I had looked at my sister when I learned this, and I went, like, that is a new soul. And I've always been called an old soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think, like, we've done this many times before. And I made a mistake in the past life, so I get to do this again.
I'm not close to the idea of reincarnation, but I don't see like what it is that reincarnates. Like
I think it's your soul. It's not
is it
your,
like so when you say soul, do you mean like the intuition that's at the core of because it's not just your ability to is it just your ability to be
no,
aware?
it's your character. It's your ability to interface with the real world. It's that thing that you're trying to describe in me that,
Mm-hmm.
like, why was that there? Well, it's probably there in a past life.
Yeah, but where did it come from? Like I feel like it's kind of like a medium answer where it's like it just pushes the problem off to like a few iterations back, but it still doesn't answer like where did it come from.
Well, that's why I say it's just like I've been working on the humility to understand that I will find out when I depart this world. And I'm hoping that one of these times when I die, someone will finally tell me why I had to go through it all.
Yeah, I don't care if anybody tells me.
I do. I want to know. I'm infinitely curious.
I'm curious. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. I'm definitely like curious about the answer to that question if there's an answer.
So it's a neat trip. I don't understand why, but then there's things that I'm very naive about. So I don't know what it is. I seem to have a very good grasp on the physical world, but I have a very terrible grasp on the emotional world. So I think that maybe that's where I went wrong was. So I'm here this round to try and figure out how to be more emotional. I don't know. It's just a guess at this point.
Yeah, totally. No, it totally. Like it's not only is it's more than a guess. It's a guess that has sustained cultures across the world for like since the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the idea of reincarnation. I think it's not.
It's not impossible.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not impossible. We don't know anything. We don't know any of the answers to like what mind is. I don't like. We could be the same mind, and we just happen to be trapped into two different user interfaces.
Yeah.
Like we don't know. That's more what the Buddhist idea is, but it still comes back to the same problem. It's like, well, where's that even coming from?
Mm-hmm. Which could be your God.
Well, there's something.
So it's
placeholder.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's probably a great spot to end it on. Almost a bit of a cliffhanger.
All right. We're so overexposed. Look at us.
I know.
When the sun came out.
Okay. I am dying of heat too.